There we go.
Quick,
Okay,
quick, get rid of Belusi while we have a chance.
and we're back. And we're back.
Oh,
I see my distinguished chair. Rep Gresco, are you taking the helm or do you want me to keep going?
no, keep going. I want to harass Belusi.
All right. Thank you. We have Bill Lucy up next, followed by Drew Tower and then Tim Phelan. Bill, take it away. Thank you.
All right. Well, good evening. I was hoping for a slot that say good morning for another marathon meeting. My name is Bill Lucy. I work as a Long Island Soundkeeper for Save the Sound. I'm here to speak in favor of Senate Bill 118. Save the Sound coordinates the International Coastal Cleanup for Connecticut, which means we gather data from over 70 cleanups a year through the efforts of about 2,000 volunteers. For those cleanups, we collect a tremendous amount of data on what kind of trash is washing up on our beaches. This data is important because when the legislature makes a policy change, we can monitor the real effects on the ground. After the plastic bag ban, we saw a pre-COVID drop in plastic litter, and hopefully we're going to see the same thing with the passage of the bottle bill last year. Other data has been collected regarding polystyrene. Soon after initiating a polystyrene ban in Maryland, which was mentioned before, the Mr. Trash Wheel, which some of you may be familiar with, which had captured 1 million styrofoam containers over 5 years in Baltimore Harbor, saw the collection of styrofoam containers in that machine drop by 80% 1 year later. So it had a real effect. The next logical step in getting rid of marine debris in Connecticut is to phase out polystyrene. We pick up over 20,000 pieces of polystyrene over the last 3 years, but we're really just scratching the surface of this problem. This foam, along with other plastics, breaks down in sunlight and releases chemicals packed between the polymer chains. This includes the styrene, phthalates, PAHs, various plasticizers in general. We've been recently interviewing researchers across the state to determine the extent of these effects on Long Island Sound. One Quinnipiac University researcher described big rafts of debris, plastic, styrofoam caught in branches up the Quinnipiac River. There's also a couple of manufacturing plants there. And they test the water for those. They use that same toxic concentration found in the river to conduct laboratory experiments on crayfish, zebrafish, and mummy chugs, which are native to Long Island Sound. They found evidence of metabolic and endocrine disruption and altered behavior such as poor predator avoidance. All this trash in our rivers are slowly leaching these toxins, which are chronically poisoning our ecosystem. And I just want to say the urban streams that I've seen have a lot more of this trash. And I also see a lot of people, especially in the pandemic, are going to these places and catching fish for food. And as a final reminder, McDonald's started phasing out polystyrene in 1990. And I think they finished finally in the Philippines in 2018. So that's, they've been doing this for around 30 years. So I think it's about time Connecticut gets on board. So we urge the passage of SB 118.
Thank you. I muted myself because my phone keeps dinging, and I don't want to annoy people. Thank you, Bill, very much. Senator Haskell, I see your hand up, sir.
Bill, thank you so much for your testimony, both provided to the committee today and also submitted electronically. And thank you for the work of Save the Sound, just, as somebody who represents coastal communities, in all of the work that you do. I wanted to mention that you submitted support partially for SB 115, an act concerning extended producer responsibility for consumer packaging. And I don't think that you had a chance to address that in your testimony verbally. So I just wanted to give you that opportunity.
Yeah, I'm going to just focus on our realm, which is picking up all the trash from the beaches and trying to keep the fish clean for the fish's sake, and also because a lot of us eat them. The trash blows out all over the place, and the EPR works great for stuff that ends up in a garbage can. And I've heard a lot of the testimony today, and I really think that the path forward is just to get rid of the packaging that won't just break down in the environment. I know there's still work to be done on that, and it's sort of a holy grail, but we should really be focusing on things that if we drop them by accident or they blow out of the back of our truck or whatever, just break down into soil and go away. Then it's not a landfill issue. If you want to collect that stuff, you can either compost it. We heard from the paper folks today, the paper manufacturing. There's a lot you can do with different paper types, and that's a much more sustainable type of packaging material than plastic.
Thanks so much for your answer, Bill, and for your work. And thank you, Madam Chair, for the time.
Thanks, Will.
Rep. Bresco. You are
Thank
up.
you, Madam Chair. Bill, in the times that we go out on the sound, besides the Mylar balloons, would you say that polystyrene is the next most picked up piece of litter?
Yeah, I mean, well, cigarette butts have been in the lead from time to time. The problem with quantifying polystyrene is it breaks down so fast, and then it becomes really difficult to pick up. So yeah, I see a lot of, because it floats and it blows, so I see a lot of polystyrene floating around. I know Rep. Michelle, early on, there was some styrofoam insulation blowing off a building in Stamford, and the whole wetland was just coated with little tiny bits of this stuff. I mean, it's an insidious product. And there's really, I mean, a lot of businesses have already transferred away from it. So we know it's possible. And, you know, one thing I will say is there may be a little bit of added cost. We heard from the recycling community that when they passed their ban in Stamford, they estimated about a $70,000 increase to the school district, that turned into more of a $25,000 increase. But when you combine that with it getting in the water and leaching out all these proven to be toxic chemicals, you have to put that into the cost benefit ratio. So yeah, it's out there and it's all over the place.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Rep. Michelle, you have a question.
Very quickly, I wanted to thank Bill and for his comments and reminding me that before pictures of my first election campaigns was myself with a shop vac in wetlands, sucking up a thick layer of fake soil in the wetlands, which was just broken down polystyrene. So I really appreciate the comments. Thank you.
No other questions from members of the committee. Thank you, Bill, very much. Up next, we have Drew Tower, followed by Tim Phelan and Ed Malley. Drew.
Great. Good evening. Thank you, chairs and other esteemed members of the Environment Committee for the opportunity to speak. I am Drew Tower, Community Resource and Policy Director at the national nonprofit Beyond Pesticides. I'm here representing our members and supporters in Connecticut. We appreciate the committee's consideration of SB 120, a bill aimed at strengthening state safeguards from chlorpyrifos and neonicotinoids, which, as we've heard today, are hazardous pesticides that harm children and pollinators. This legislation represents another important step in Connecticut's ongoing path to fill in the gaps in protection left by the federal EPA in a way that best ensures resident safety and ecological stability. Although EPA has recognized the science on the dangers these chemicals pose, the agency's actions have been incomplete. For chlorpyrifos, food tolerances were eliminated, but a range of non-agricultural uses, such as on golf courses, continue. With neonics, the agency has done nothing more than tweak the label. However, Connecticut lawmakers, in their wisdom, were the first in the country to identify the gap between the federal government's findings and its actions, and take meaningful steps to rein in neonic use, protect pollinators and other wildlife. The current version of SB 120 reinforces the restricted use status of neonics, but it does not make substantive new progress. Beyond Pesticides encourages lawmakers to review strengthening amendments provided in our written testimony that would eliminate all outdoor non-agricultural uses of these potent pesticides. Such an approach will align Connecticut with legislation recently passed in the states of New Jersey and Maine. Beyond Pesticides also hopes that the Environment Committee will not only consider this substitute language, but further amendments that eliminate all outdoor uses of neonics, including its agricultural applications. The European Union recently expanded and made permanent its decision to eliminate all outdoor neonic uses. This decision is an acknowledgement that there is no safe level of neonic exposure for foraging bees, butterflies, and other pollinators. Data show that Connecticut beekeepers have consistently reported losses above the national average of 30%, recording an astounding 65% colony loss between 2020 and 2021. So imagine if another agricultural industry, like the state's dairy or poultry farmers, lost well over 30% of their livestock, not just once, but year over year for more than the past decade. This is a pollinator crisis, but it's not just a pollinator crisis. It's not only beekeepers and their hives that are affected. Bird populations in the US have declined by 30% over the last several decades. Eastern monarch populations have declined by 80% since the 1990s, risking extinction. Aquatic ecosystems are experiencing widespread contamination, and hunters are noticing malformations in deer populations. All of these impacts have been associated with the use of neonic pesticides in peer-reviewed scientific studies. The argument put forth by those opposed to pesticide reforms that it would be preferable to endanger the future of Connecticut's children, beekeepers, native pollinators, and songbirds, rather than encourage an already necessary shift towards safer pest management practices should give lawmakers pause. We urge Connecticut lawmakers to fill in the gaps left by EPA inaction, protect children's health, reverse bird and pollinator declines by strengthening SB 120, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Drew, very much. Just out of curiosity, do you happen to know what kind of malformations in deer have been discovered?
Yes, jaw malformations in deer, and there's been ongoing studies in the Midwest that have been looking at deer livers and finding ubiquitous contamination in deer livers.
Thank you. Thank you for that very informative testimony. Any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on. Thanks again for being with us. So I believe we're looking up next at Tim Phelan, followed by James Finch and Michelle Lepar. So Tim Phelan, are you with us?
I am.
All right, go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and members of the Environment Committee. I'm Tim Phelan, President of the Connecticut Retail Merchants Association. We are a statewide trade association representing some of the world's largest retailers in the state's Main Street merchants. I'm here today to testify on 3 bills: House Bill 5139, House Bill 5142, and Senate Bill 115. I've already submitted written testimony, so I won't go into all of that. I know the hour is long. It's been a long day. I know I just came in from finishing shoveling my driveway, and I'm sure everybody wants to get to do theirs and other things on a Friday night. So I'll just summarize my testimony. If you'll tell by reading our written testimony, we are not big fans of extended producer responsibility, primarily because while the environmental goals of these proposals may be laudable, and we respect the works of the advocates on this committee and in the legislature, we strongly believe that the issue of product stewardship is not a one-size-fits-all for every product. It's important to recognize that each product has a distinct and unique circumstance, and to the extent the legislature decides to address a product's impact on the environment, it should be based on those unique circumstances. In these instances of the 3 bills we mentioned, we believe these products do not fall into the category that need addressing. There's been a lot of conversation already today about consumer packaging, so I won't add to that, just to say that most of the stuff that comes in packages somehow or another will go through one of our stores, and we will be impacted by that, and our consumers will be impacted by that. With respect to gas cylinders, we believe we know the industry took seriously your challenge to them from last session, and I believe they've developed a program that addresses the recycling of small, mid-size, and large gas cylinders. That does not call for an advanced recovery fee or a stewardship council. I encourage you to continue to work closely and review their plan, and as I will with you with them if I could be of any assistance. With regard to tires, we strongly believe there is no compelling evidence that calls for a stewardship program. We strongly encourage you to listen to the business experience described by CRMA member Town Fair Tire. As you know, Town Fair is a leading Connecticut business with its corporate headquarters in East Haven and with 36 stores throughout Connecticut, as well as additional stores in New York, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Maine, and Vermont, totaling over 100 locations. As Town Fair, which I would say has the majority of market share here in Connecticut, would be happy to share with you and any members of the committee, at every location that they have a store in has a municipally approved junkyard cage in the rear of the store, and each and every one is handled environmentally safely, and each cage completely cleaned out at a minimum once a week, depending on the volume. Each junk tire they remove from a customer's vehicle goes into that cage for disposal. And in 2021 alone, more than 2.8 million junk tires were removed responsibly from those cages, including some placed, as you might have heard this earlier from testimony from other folks, that placed there by smaller local companies that do some just dumping of tires in the used tire market that exist. Town Fair removes those safely at
Mr.
their own
Phelan?
expense.
I'm sorry, your
No.
time is up.
Okay. So anyways, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yes, I see Rep. O'Day has a question, and then I believe we're going to move on to the next speaker after that, unless there's another. Oh, Rep. Gresco too. Rep. O'Day, you're first, sir. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, Mr. Phelan, just real quick, you were saying, finishing up, that Town Fair actually takes care of tires that are dumped on their site. If you want to just finish your comment.
Thank you, Representative Day. Yes, I mean, the vast majority of tires that Town Fair picks up, whether they're direct customers for Town Fairs or whether Town Fair is also a wholesaler, so they do work with local car dealerships throughout the state. They take and handle those responsibly, put them back in the cages as we described, but they are also victims of tire dumping done by used tire operations throughout the state. They'll come onto their property, they'll look through their cages, take out the good tires and dump the bad tires. Town Fair includes that in their cost of disposing of their tires. They work with David Greenstone at Lincoln Tire to handle that, and that's all part of their existing process that takes place. And I would just add, Representative O'Day and other members of the committee, I think there was conversation earlier today about gathering more evidence to find out exactly how many tires are discarded. I think that's an excellent idea, rather than jumping into an EPR program, which in this case, with the case of tires, would really kind of upend what we think is a positive program that takes place with tires, notwithstanding the evidence of the tires that get disposed illegally and put in areas and rivers and streams throughout the state, which nobody supports. But overall, the vast majority of those tires disposed of are done in an environmentally safe manner.
All right, thank you very much for your testimony, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Chair Gresco, followed by Chair Cohen, and at that point, I am going to turn the reins back over to her. Rep. Gresco, you are up, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I had a question for Tim. So the scenario that you just laid out that Town Fair Tire does in the state of Connecticut, which if you take it for fact is exactly what we're looking for to have happen across the state, and not just have one entity, even though they have the vast majority of the market to do. That's the kind of thing that we're looking for the industry, since they have the boots on the ground and the expertise, to say to the rest of the industry, hey, this is what we need to do to stop illegal tires. So I applaud you for bringing up a Town Fair Tire and giving the example of how we want this to work and function across the whole state of Connecticut. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome, Representative Gresco. I will also add that Costco is a member of our association. They too have a similar program in place with Lincoln Tire as well. But so I will pass your remarks along to them.
Thank you, Representative Gresco. And Mr. Phelan, thanks for being here and thanks for your testimony. I just wanted to ask, I think I heard you say that the retailers support the current exchange and refill program as it exists now. Is that correct?
On
cylinders?
Well, my understanding, Madam Chair, is that the bill that's being considered, which would set up a EPR program for gas cylinders, is the manufacturers are working on developing a different alternative, is what I was referring to, that would not require a collection of advanced recovery fee by consumers at the point of sale. That's what I meant.
So just to clarify, you are in support of the cylinder legislation as written, or you are opposed?
No, we oppose the bill as drafted, and we would encourage you to, I guess, what I was referring to was that my understanding is that there are ongoing discussions between manufacturers and perhaps members of the committee for an amendment to the bill, let's say, that would create a different stewardship type program that does not include the collection of a fee at the point of sale.
Representative Gresco, did you want to jump in at all and respond to that?
The whole the whole conversation that we've had in the office session was the industry working with us to create a convenient and consistent and free disposal process. So I don't know where you're getting this money at the point of sale. If anything, the collection of the discarded cylinders will eventually make some sort of money, either by refurbishing, reuse, or melting down to recycle.
Yeah.
So
what I was referring to, Representative Gresco, and again, I apologize if I haven't been clear enough about this, is that my understanding was that the bill as drafted would create a product stewardship type program for gas cylinders, for small, medium, and large gas cylinders, where similar to mattresses or paint, for instance, but that the manufacturers are developing another plan, an alternative plan that still takes back gas cylinders, but doesn't charge, again, terminology, but doesn't charge an additional fee to consumers at the point of sale. That's what I was referring to. Now, if that's not the case, maybe I have that wrong.
that's what I'm saying. It's going to end up being internalized process by the industry and free for the customer.
Right. Perfect. That's great. We like that.
You're all over the
place.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be all over the place. We like that approach as opposed to the approach that was laid out in the bill, which sets up it does set up a council. Both set up councils, but one is set up similar to what is set up with mattresses and paint. When mattress and paint, you collect a fee at the point of sale. My understanding is you won't do that. You may set up a council, but that council will not charge the customer a fee at the point of sale. That's the approach that we like.
That's the approach that the industry, this is the industry's language that they provided to us.
Well, the bill that okay, then maybe I've read the bill wrong.
Well, you know what, Madam Chair.
It sounds like we're all on the same page.
I think we are. I do. I think we all are on the same page. I just, yeah.
I'm glad we asked the question, Mr. Phelan. And if after you read the bill, again, you still have questions, I encourage you to reach out to Representative Gresco and myself.
Madam Chair, it'd be my pleasure to reach out to you. Representative Gresco and I go back a long time. I'll have to work gently in that area, but just kidding. I would be happy to work with Representative Gresco and you on this issue.
Terrific. Sounds great. Thank you, Mr. Phelan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And next we have Ed Malley. Welcome.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, perfect.
All right. Senator Cohen and members of the committee, thank you for your time this evening. My name is Edward James Malley IV. I am a Connecticut resident and a proud veteran. I am here today to offer some insights as to why Senate Bill 115 should not be passed. I am in a unique position to discuss the issues with this bill, as I was formerly employed by the federal government, later provided contractual services to the federal government through a private business, and I presently work for a private family-owned business in the waste and recycling industry, which deals directly with state and municipal governing bodies. There are three basic responsibilities in governance: to provide security to the people, to help ensure order, and lastly, to provide services to the public. The latter of the three is where this legislative body feels Senate Bill 115 falls into. I am a big proponent of sensible innovation. When there is a problem or there is a better alternative to a current practice of any kind, change should be sought. Connecticut currently rates in the top 5 states in our country for our recycling programs. We do a better job than 90% of the USA when it comes to recycling. This legislation you seek to pass has proven to actually reduce recycling rates and does so at a significant cost to residents of Connecticut. The intent of this bill is to hit the Amazons or large companies with fees based on materials they use to package goods. But the reality is these cost increases large corporations receive under this bill, they would be passed on to the consumer who has already been pummeled by inflation rates that are the highest they've been in the past 20 years. Estimates indicate that the cost per household on an annual basis will amount to over $700 per resident and would yield the state of Connecticut over $1 billion a year. My first concern is for the residents of our state. People are already in very tough places financially, and this will place more stress on them. My second concern is the lack of research put into this bill. What happens when the $1 billion cost on this endeavor isn't nearly enough money, and it's not even close to achieve your goals? The answer is that Connecticut residents will bear the burden of even more significant taxation. These exact practices have failed elsewhere. By every measurable standard, they have been a failure. The cost of this recycling practice in British Columbia, Canada, has increased by 43% over a 3-year period and has reduced their recycling rates. Ontario's costs have gone up 300%. Senate Bill 115 offers zero benefit to the residents of Connecticut, and there is an underestimated burden the state of Connecticut will be placing on itself by passing this legislation. You should vote no on this bill. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Malley, and I want to just thank you first for foremost for your service to our country. I see Representative O'Day has a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for your testimony, sir. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just real quick, where did the data that you just gave us is similar to what I've heard tonight, but then we were given some counter data. Where did you get your data? If you could refer us to it, or
the same data that Dr. Lacan testified about.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, and appreciate it, and thank you for your service, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Chafee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your testimony tonight, hanging in there today. I had the same exact question as Rep. O'Day. What is the source for the figures you're citing? I know you said $700 a year for the average household. And
this was the 4 to 9% increase in the cost of goods that Dr. Lacan talked about from the Blue Box study in British Columbia, Canada.
Okay, so who did that study?
That data was pulled from the actual municipalities up there directly. It wasn't so much a study. This was just a breakdown of the data that they have that you can find regarding the study from British Columbia.
All right, I will look into that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you, Mr. Malley. I think that's all the questions for you this evening.
Thank you, ma'am.
Next, we have James Finch.
Yes, thank you, Senator. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
It's a pleasure to be once again before the Environmental Committee. I'm here to testify in favor of Senate Bill 119, which, as many of you recall, is similar to a bill that was proposed last year, Bill 971, which originated from the Governor's Climate Change Task Force, which involved the State Treasurer's Office investing local municipal and climate change coastal resiliency funds. And one of the benefits of this is that you have the expertise and knowledge of the State Treasurer's Office, and for some communities that don't have pension plans, and there are a number who don't. If you even look on the State Controller's website, the CMERS membership, you'll see 5 pages of participant groups that participate in the state plan. This provides a good vehicle for those communities. The other thing I want to focus on is, I think there's another way, there's a way to do this that I think has some great benefits for the state. And that is for the State Treasurer's Office to create a statewide coastal resiliency climate change fund with state assets in that. And that's a very similar model to what the short-term investment fund does. which is also managed by the state treasurer, which was founded in 1972, the State Short-Term Investment Fund. And currently, over half the assets in the Short-Term Investment Fund are in fact state of Connecticut assets. So what could the state of Connecticut do by doing that? Well, one, they can then be investing state dollars for the state's long-term liabilities associated with climate change. They can leverage federal grants. And as we know, there's a lot of them that are coming down the road. We've heard about the infrastructure plan. There's FEMA. Well, it's not a leverage situation. There's ARPA and the Storm Act. You'll probably be hearing more about the Storm Act going forward. And some of the earnings off that, the state can use it to advance some of its goals. One of the themes I heard tonight as related to packaging was, what's the adverse impact on various communities in the state of Connecticut? Well, the proceeds and earnings from this type of fund, even at the state level, can certainly help the state meet some of those goals. And finally, by making it available to all the political subdivisions like the STIF fund, those communities will have the benefit of that, what was it intended to do, which was to provide that expertise to the communities. And I did happen to see Treasurer Wooden's testimony, and I agree 100%. I think participating members should have an investment policy statement. Brantford has a draft investment policy statement, which I anticipate the Board of Finance approving at their Monday meeting. So again, thank you for this opportunity to speak on this, and I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I'd be happy to participate down the road if you want to engage more with the State Treasurer's Office. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Finch, and well timed. I saw your time was just up, so perfectly done. I just want to express my appreciation for all your hard work on this important issue of resiliency for the state. You've done a great service not only to the town of Brantford, but all the people of the state and municipal leaders, and really leading the charge on this. So I'd love it if you could explain a little bit more about why it's necessary or why it's helpful to have the Office of the State Treasurer involved in investing these funds from municipalities. And then I know you had talked about creating the own, our own fund at the state level, similar to the STIF dollars, that are available to municipalities. I had asked the DEEP some time ago this morning about creating a statewide pool of dollars that perhaps could be used for matching funds for towns with smaller projects. And I just wonder, and I was thinking of it in more looking modeled like our grant program for land trust or open space and watershed grant program that we have, OSWA, which is actually their bonded dollars, and folks apply to that program. It's always many more applications and not enough dollars, but certainly a very successful program. So I just wonder what your thoughts are on that versus what your suggestion stated, which is to model a similar program after STIF.
Okay, there was lots to unpack there, so hopefully I'll hit some of the highlights. I think, well, let's start first with the example of STIF. So basically what the state of Connecticut is doing as part of a public purpose is creating an investment pool, which then they're professionally managing. So Michael Terry up at the state is managing that. So finance directors, political subdivisions, they can basically open up an account with STIF, and then they get the benefits of the short-term investment fund. By them doing the same thing with a coastal resiliency fund, it's similar to, but not perfectly aligned with what the controller's office does and the treasurer's office does with pension plans. So many municipalities have their own pension plan, but some of them, that's sort of a burden to administer a pension plan, hire investment managers, et cetera. So some of those opt to piggyback with the state through like the CMERS program. So that's another example where the state has created a process and investment vehicle for towns and cities to fund benefits to employees, long-term liabilities associated with pension costs. So that would be another example of how that would work. But essentially, it's economies of scale. I'll give you a third example, which is when families try to fund a child's education. So, for example, rather than every household have their own college fund, the state of Connecticut, through the Connecticut Higher Education Trust and the state treasurer's office, again, has deemed it a public purpose to basically set up a program, a product, so that individual families can participate in that and leverage the state of Connecticut to meet the goals of trying to fund a child's education. I think anytime that you can segregate pools of dollars over time, and you have an ability to make those dollars grow, and you use that to leverage other dollars. And I think that gets to the latter part of your question, Senator, is how does this help with other programs? I mean, I think it's a combination. This would be town dollars in this case and state dollars, but by making those things match grants, you get a lot of leverage. For example, I know 6441 is not on the table, and that was the bill where the real estate conveyance fee would basically be used to leverage resiliency projects. And I'm not going to revisit why that failed, but we had modeled this in Brantford, saying, okay, so if we had those dollars coming into Brantford based on 12 months worth of sales that we discounted by 20% because of the market, and then we took our current balance in our coastal resiliency fund and we continued to make contributions at that level, we found that you can, in Brantford, leverage a $17 million project, using those dollars and the earnings to pay off the bonds without any additional tax dollars, and still have considerable dollars left over. So I think, it's a piece of the puzzle, but there's a lot of folks like yourselves that are wrestling with these things, and a lot of the groups that have submitted testimony on this and other things. The Green Bank is another example. There's a lot of folks that are putting their heads together to try to figure out different vehicles. And I guess the long and short of my argument is that, I think there's things that the state can do similar to what they're already doing, which could actually make things better for all of us and leverage it. And so, like I said, I'd be happy to, continue those discussions.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think, our goal is simply to make sure we are leveraging and maximizing the dollars that can be made available to us at the federal level, and then turn that around and help our municipalities across the state to ensure that they're, becoming more resilient in light of storm surges and flooding and, different climate effects. So appreciate your help. I don't see any other questions, and glad you were here to testify.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Michelle Lepar, followed by Ryan Cornoyer. I don't want to say your name wrong. Sorry about that. You can correct me when you come on, but Michelle, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Senator Cohen. Good evening, Senator Cohen, Representative Gresco, and members of the Environment Committee. My name is Michelle Leeper. I'm a resident of Simsbury, Connecticut, and I'm currently a graduate student in the Masters of Social Work program at the UConn School of Social Work with a concentration in community organizing. I'm also the very proud mother of Jonah, whose testimony you heard earlier today. I'm here today to testify in my role as a mother, student, and future social worker in strong support of SB 118 to ban the use of expanded polystyrene materials. As the environment is the purview of this committee, I feel there's no need to remind the esteemed members here of the rapidly closing window we have to act to save our planet from human-made environmental threats. Single-use products are one of the most immediately visible sources of planetary harm and are symbolic of one of the more selfish sides of human nature, the willingness to pay for small conveniences with our planets and our own health. As none of us want to pass a legacy of waste and laziness down to our children, it is important that we normalize consideration of the environment as part of our daily lives and to model behavior for our youngest citizens that shows we respect and value the earth. Using single-use items like polystyrene trays in environments such as schools can give students the impression that waste is okay and morally neutral instead of short-sighted and harmful. We try to set the opposite example at home, using cloth napkins and reusable storage containers instead of more convenient disposable options like Ziploc bags. Our schools are in a position to do the same for our students, and if SB 118 passes, school boards would be further supported in implementing policies that reflect the value of environmental stewardship over convenience. Banning expanded polystyrene in Connecticut would put us on par with our neighbor New York and other nearby states like New Jersey, who recently enacted similar bans. 54 cities and towns in our neighboring state of Massachusetts ban polystyrene in food packaging, and our neighbor Rhode Island is also considering a bill this year that would reduce single-use products. As a coastal state, it is extremely important that we join with our neighbors in this ban, which would help protect aquatic environments from pollutants like expanded polystyrene. This is not the first time a proposed polystyrene ban of one kind or another has come before this committee. I urge you to work to make this the year that the ban moves forward, but I also must ask that you not stop there. I demand that the legislature act to make environmental stewardship a norm and that you not push this effort off for another year. The actions that you, as our elected leaders, take set examples for all of Connecticut's citizens, from young to old. The fate of our planet will affect the descendants of both sides of the aisle equally, so we must act together. Thank you for allowing me to testify on this important issue.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Leeper, for testifying tonight, and you should be proud of your son. We were appreciative of his testimony as well. I see my co-chair, Representative Gresco, has a question for you.
Actually, not a question, just a comment along the same lines. Keep up the good work with Jonah.
Thank you. I'll try to stay out of his way.
Great. Well, seeing no other questions, again, thank you for your time and advocacy.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Ryan, and I will not do that again to you, Ryan. So feel free to correct me and state your name and provide your testimony. Welcome.
Okay, yeah, you weren't that far off. It's Knoyer. So thanks a lot, Senator. And thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Ryan Knoyer. I'm a process and sales engineer for Van Dyke Recycling Solutions, a Connecticut-based company out of Norwalk. What we do is we build MRFs across North America. So I was involved with all the parties at EPR in BC and still involved with the EPR situation in Ontario, working with the different haulers and the different recyclers and municipalities to make sure that things move smoothly. So I've got some input on their particular situations. So as Van Dyke, we don't believe it's totally necessary in Connecticut to move forward with EPR. We've been involved in MRF design and construction for single stream facilities across North America since 1984. We work closely with the haulers and munis to keep up to date with changes across the industry and provide innovative technology to ensure highest recovery and quality of recycled material possible. So we built plants in New York, Toronto, Chicago, Houston, Dallas, Vancouver, and others. And we're currently in the process of modernizing MRFs in Connecticut and really excited to contribute to recycling improvements in our home state. So from our perspective, both in the US and Canada, I could see where EPR legislation is important. For instance, states or provinces where the recycling infrastructure and programs are really well spread out geographically, there's a lot of waste logistics-wise. The other issue is that in Ontario alone, there's over 45 MRFs, material recovery facilities, small ones, big ones, all over the gamut. A lot of the small ones have difficulty providing enough tonnage to warrant investment from the municipalities. So that's why EPR made sense for me in Ontario and BC, because it restructured their entire recycling program and kind of consolidated a lot of waste that was happening there. Connecticut's a totally different category. We're a densely populated state. There's only 4 or 5 MRFs that take in a lot of tonnage and do a really good job. We've heard today we're in the top 5 across the United States in terms of recycling rates, and that's totally true from what I see as a plant builder. So these entities within Connecticut are currently investing money right now to get up to speed because of things like National Sword and some of the plastic crises that we've seen. So we're ahead of the game. I'm working with them to do so. And I just see EPR as just another hurdle. It's going to become, we're basically breaking something that's not broken, is what I believe. I think we're making strides in the right direction. And by having EPR come in, it's going to take years for us to come to terms with the program. We're going to have debates like this. I've been in Ontario for 7 years, and it's still not implemented at this point. What actually happened was in Ontario was people stopped investing in technology because of concern about EPR. So there's a lot of instability, uncertainty, and that stopped progress. So that's what I'm concerned about for Connecticut, and that's why we're against Bill 115.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cournoyer. I see Representative Day has a question for you, followed by Representative Mashinsky.
Sure.
Thank you very much for your testimony. As Ryan, as someone, I live in New Canaan, so I'm right next door. I looked for, you don't have any written testimony, is that correct?
I do. I sent it in yesterday.
Oh, I'm sorry. I looked for it. I didn't see it. I'll look again. I appreciate that. When you say it'll break it down, our system, because we're one of the, I think everybody's kind of coalesced around the fact that we're in the top 5 in recycling in the country. Obviously, that's one area where I'd like to be number 1, so as opposed to taxation and cost. I think you said that this would break it down. What do you mean by that?
Meaning that the infrastructure we have in Connecticut right now with our haulers are doing a good job. What happened in BC is there's a lot of independent companies that had small pieces of the pie across the entire province. When EPR came in, they gave the contract to one consortium, and it was a big consortium. So a lot of our friends that we worked with, that we sell balers to and equipment to, had no more material, and we're left in the lurch. So that's what I mean by break it down. EPR is going to take our current system, take the contracts away from our haulers and people that are, currently doing business, and just restructuring the whole thing. And I just think we're doing a good enough job in Connecticut, and it's much bigger undertaking than we think, is my point.
Thank you. My last follow-up, if I may, if you were to try and get us from number 5 to number 1, what would you do?
5 to number 1. I think we're doing it right now. I mean, the investment they're making at Murphy Road is huge. It's going to be one of the most modernized plants in the country. We're going to see similar things across the state, things that are going to work. I can't talk about, but we're already moving forward.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Cournoyer, for your testimony. I'll look for the written testimony. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Mashinsky.
Okay, Mr. Cournoyer, I'm skeptical about the MRFs because I went on the plant tour through the one in Middlefield, or it could have been on the Middletown side of the line, but it's right in there anyway, off of 91. And when all the mixed recyclables were processed through the plant, at the end, they had a couple of truckloads going to a glass factory and a plastic reuse and metals. But the majority of the trucks were filled with unusable material. And I asked, where is it going? And they said, it's going to a landfill. So out of all the material that the MRF handled, a large portion of it was being landfilled somewhere else. And I also know that some of the material can't go into the blue bins, and it goes into trash containers, then a transfer station, and then it goes to a waste energy plant such as the Mira plant in Hartford, which is going to be closing. So when I've seen all that in person, I ask you, how do you think the state of Connecticut can make it through the next generation of waste disposal if we don't have Mira, if we don't want to pay exorbitant rates to send our trash out of state that can't be turned into something useful? And I've seen that with my own eyes in the MRF plant tour. So how do you convince me that when we lose Mira, your facility or facilities like yours can completely take over all the solid waste without raising costs for my constituents or any other town's constituents? How do you convince me?
All right, so the MRF that we're building on Murphy Road and elsewhere, that is solely focused on the blue box material. So the solid waste issue you're talking about is a completely separate thing. There are across North America dirty MRFs, we're calling them, MSW MRFs, where we're trying to extract the recyclables that shouldn't be there and take those out of that solid waste stream. So there are options in California. We just built a plant in Santa Barbara that's doing that right now. But that has to come from you. It has to come from the state to decide to go down that direction. Otherwise, you're right. I mean, we'll be landfilling elsewhere. I mean, that's what it is. And I thought between Deep and between Mira, there was supposed to be some type of solution to the incinerator that got shut down at one point. But that's the direction we're going to. In Europe, they're already doing that. There are really no landfills. So they're what we call dirty MRFs. They're creating energy. They're doing lots of different things with the MSW and the solid waste instead of just burying it.
Okay, well, that's just my skeptical reaction when you come in and say you think you can handle everything, and because we're number 5, we'll be fine. Well, I just don't agree. I went through this whole solid waste thing several decades ago, and it was very ugly. It was town versus town. It was I don't want the site. No, they don't want the site. No, it's a justice issue. They don't want the site. We went round and round and round on this, and finally stabilized it with a lot of effort so that nothing was being shipped out of state. Now we're back in that same spot again. We're out of capacity. We see a shutdown looming in our future. And the recycling rates are not very good when you consider what actually is recycled out of blue bin. I know everything goes in the blue bin, but the stuff that's in the bin doesn't all go to recycling. That's what I saw with my own eyes when I toured the facility. So,
That's right.
I am somewhat cynical and skeptical here.
That's right. Every plant's got a residue line on the end. And because of wish cycling, a lot of people are throwing things into their bin that isn't recyclable. So it has to go to landfill. There's nothing we can do with it.
Yeah, and that'll be expensive when we start shipping away. But anyway, I'm glad you're here. You are part of the system that we're using now, and I'm glad you're here to talk with us about this. So thank you for coming in.
All right, thank you. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Representative. And I think that's it, Mr. Canoyer. So thank you for being with us tonight.
Thanks a lot.
Next, we have Alana Farnsworth. Ms. Farnsworth, are you with us?
Yep, I'm here. Hi,
thank you for your patience.
Thank you. Thank you for your time this evening, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to provide my testimony in support of proposed Senate Bill 118, an act concerning the use of certain polystyrene for food. I know you've heard a lot of testimony in support of this bill already today, not even just this evening. So I'm going to try not to be redundant. My name is Elena Farnsworth. I'm currently a resident of Durham, Connecticut, and a graduate student of UConn School of Social Work. I'm also a mother of a 6-year-old little girl named Angela. As such, I urge you to pass Senate Bill 118 to protect our children from exposure to these harmful materials. Expanded polystyrene foam is a product being referred to in this bill. It's a type of plastic that's composed of harmful toxic chemicals. Polystyrene's base is called styrene. It's a known neurotoxin and a suspected carcinogen. As temperatures increase when these products are heated, and with certain foods such as fats and oils, styrene leaching rises, which allows the toxins to be absorbed into the food that is then consumed. Another human health risk is the synthetic additives to these products. Children are even more susceptible to the known health hazards for a few reasons, one being their behavior and the other being their development. Depending on the ages, children's behavior greatly varies, as younger children put things in their mouths as part of their learning and play behaviors. Since children are growing, they're going through continuous stages of development, all of which are crucial to their health and well-being. For these reasons and more, it's essential to pass this bill so the state of Connecticut can move progressively to ensure our children's health and safety. Besides the health threats of expanded polystyrene products to children, the risks to adults are also present. And there are other outstanding concerns related to environmental hazards and issues with not being able to recycle these products. The environmental hazards consist of the fact that these foam materials are not biodegradable. They present long-term danger in the form of waste for the environment, particularly our oceans. High numbers of wildlife perish each year from the ingestion of polystyrene and other toxic plastics, since these animals make the mistake of these materials for food or nesting materials. Polystyrene foam is not often recycled because it's not readily accepted for curbside recycling in most states. This contributes to waste and pollution, so recycling these products is impractical. Our children's safety and health is a paramount concern for all of Connecticut residents. The future of the environment is critical for all future generations. For the reasons I presented today, I urge the committee to move forward with this bill, SB 118. Thank you again for allowing me to testify in support of this bill today, and have a great remainder of your night.
Thank you so much, Ms. Farnsworth, for your testimony. You're clearly well studied on the topic of expanded polystyrene, and I thank you. I don't see any other questions from the committee tonight. So thanks again for your patience. I know you waited a long time to testify. Next, we have Donna Hansey.
Good evening, Senator Cohen, Representative Gresco, and other members of the Environment Committee. Thank you for your stamina today, and I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you regarding 3 bills that we've submitted testimony in support of, and all 3 deal with EPR. The first I will mention is EPR for gas cylinders. This bill came before you last year, but there's been much work done between then and now with Worthington and other stakeholders to come to the bill that we have before us today. Municipalities essentially just are having a problem dealing with gas cylinders, and they're in the end of life of those materials. And so we believe that similar to mattresses and paint, this would be a helpful solution to the gas cylinder issue in our state. Same issue applies to tires, and as has been discussed throughout the day, tires are, a huge problem for municipalities, specifically because we in the end have to pay for their disposal, and there's a lot of illegal dumping of these types of materials, and we believe that an EPR system will help to manage the end of life of these products. And finally, and I'm short because I know you've been here for a long day, but the EPR for packaging proposal, while we understand that this is very new for everyone, it is one that has been constantly discussed over the past many years regarding packaging and paper. CCM specifically is concerned about the increased costs that towns are having to bear as the recycling markets have changed, as you all know, and municipalities are in a position where we are mandated to provide services to our residents for solid waste and recycling, and thus, because of the markets, have to ride these waves. And we feel that EPR for packaging specifically is one area where we might have opportunity to create some savings. We don't see it as the panacea, but it is one step towards a solution of getting municipalities out from under having to pay the exorbitant costs, and then thus, of course, passing that on to our residents through a regressive property tax system to pay for these materials to be processed. So I'll leave it there, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks so much, Donna. And I see Rep. O'Day has a question for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your testimony. I was just reviewing CCM's testimony. I don't know how long you've been on. We've heard some conflicting data on whether there's going to be savings or cost to municipalities. Has CCM taken a dive into that data to confirm either a $30 to $40 million savings, or that it in fact will be a cost?
Thank you. We are just we've not done any studies to confirm or with our own independent research on the savings that is being identified by the department. But at the same time, we lean on the department for these types of things. I mean, they are our agency that has the appropriate staff to make these determinations. And so we're leaning on their data and also just data that we've seen globally where this program has worked.
So when you say globally, are you referring to like British Columbia? Is that the data you're referring to?
That, and I believe there are some areas of Europe where EPR is also successful.
Any examination of Maine or Oregon as to whether or not those programs are successful?
I have not spoken to my counterparts there. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming out and for sticking around on a Friday evening at 8:38. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. And yes, thank you, Donna, for your patience with us. This was a long day and appreciate you being here.
You all deserve the thanks. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
You too. Okay, next we have, I believe next is Gretchen Tarrin. I don't see her in the waiting room. And Frank Antonacci already testified, so we are on to number 100. Mr. Gorman, welcome. Mr. Gorman, you're on mute.
He doesn't know how to get off. I'm reading his lips. He doesn't know how to get off mute.
Madam Chair,
there you go.
Madam Chair, Madam Clerk.
Sorry
Okay,
about
perfect,
that.
great.
All right, now I have to exit full screen. All right. Well, thank you very much once again for another late night and for the opportunity to testify. Good evening, Senator Cohen, Representative Gresco, Senator Minor, Representative Harding, and the distinguished members of the Environment Committee. My name is Peter Gorman, and I'm a resident of Newington and currently serve as the president of the Connecticut Environmental Council. I'm a former golf course superintendent at the Pine Orchard Yacht and Country Club in Brantford and have maintained a Class 3B supervisory pesticide license for 20 years. Thank you again for the affording me the opportunity to testify in opposition of Senate Bill 120, an act concerning the use of chlorpyrifos on golf courses and neonicotinoids for non-agricultural use. As was the case 2 years ago, it's not my intention to defend the use of chlorpyrifos. My intent is to defend the regulatory framework established under FIFRA and oppose restriction of individual pest control products through legislative action. The Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act is the key framework guiding review, registration, and regulation of pesticides in the United States. FIFRA's regulatory framework was established in the 1940s and has been updated multiple times to ensure the production, sale, distribution, and use of pest control products will not generally cause unreasonable adverse effects on the environment, taking into account the economic, social, and environmental costs and benefits of the use of any pesticide. Under FIFRA, all pesticide registrations must undergo periodic review and renewal to ensure the risk-benefit analyses utilize the best and most current information possible. At any time, the agency may undertake any other review of a pesticide under FIFRA, irrespective of the pesticide's past, ongoing, scheduled, or not yet scheduled registration review. This process restricts or revokes registrations for products that pose a threat to the environment. In this case, chlorpyrifos replaced products like chlordane and DDT. The decision to target chlorpyrifos specifically on golf courses is based on limited information obtained from pesticide use summaries submitted to DEEP. It does not consider the small percentage of golf courses in the state where the applications were made, the total number of applications made each year, or the small percentage of total area treated, and it ignores the steps taken to minimize damage and control the pest population before chlorpyrifos was selected as a last resort. In the future, CTEC would be happy to work with the Environment Committee, DEEP, and the Agricultural Experiment Station to obtain the data that might provide a more thorough representation of the use of these products and determine the actual risks associated with the applications. With respect to the neonicotinoid portion of the bill, our organization chose to allow me to testify today on behalf of our industries, and as the current restrictions apply to their use of these products. As Dr. Stoner mentioned earlier, many of the people testifying today are suggesting that this bill will ban most uses of neonicotinoids.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gorman, your time is up.
Do you have a closing statement, Mr. Gorman?
Yeah, just a quick summary. I would expect that should the proposed language be expanded to an outright ban rather than expanding the current restrictions, that the public would be afforded the opportunity to provide testimony regarding the revised language. And finally, as always, we would like to express our support of DEEP and encourage the Environment Committee to encourage the General Assembly to provide them with the resources necessary to improve their ability to manage, monitor, and enforce the pesticide laws established under FIFRA. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And just to clarify what you just said, you were saying if the committee were going to change the language, you would like the opportunity to testify further on the language?
Yes. So when we looked at these proposed bills, again, we've been able to express these concerns to the leadership of the committee earlier. There's nothing, so a few of you, this is nothing new, but we didn't want to pass up the opportunity to present our core values of protecting FIFRA. And many of our members were out plowing snow today. So we figured that rather in the interest of respecting your time on your busy schedule today, that we would submit one testimony rather than send hundreds of people at you. But now that we have seen much of the testimony, we fear that the bill that there may be amendments that come out to the General Assembly that would expand the language to include an outright ban. And if that were the case, we feel that it would be justified for our members to be able to provide testimony.
Oh, okay, thank you, Mr. Gorman. Representative O'Day.
Yeah, sorry, no, I want to thank the staff for keeping people on time, but I just wanted to, Mr. Gorman, if there's anything you wanted to finish up with, you've waited all this time. I just want to make sure we've heard everything you wanted to say.
Yeah, again, a lot of it deals, I was able to kind of condense and skip. I've submitted written testimony that expands a little bit more on some of these things. I wanted to be able to, provide a few comments on what I've heard over the course of the day. Again, the reality is that the industries that we represent, especially golf courses, do a lot to contribute to Connecticut's environmental health, to our economic health, and we feel that also should be considered, and that the nature of these concerns represent a very small portion of what we do, and I just feel that should be represented.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And the good ranking member, Representative Harding.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity because you had mentioned, testifying if there were to be a permanent ban. Would you like to just briefly just address, your concerns, what that would mean for your industry?
Well, there are, so again, we feel that there's a lot of information. So I could go and I could have brought in tons of information about the difference between agricultural uses and applications to turf grass systems, the nature of difference between applying these pesticides to open soil in an agricultural setting versus applying them to a turf grass system, and the difference in the microbial habitat and the filtration that healthy turf grass systems provide. We could talk about the values of the turf systems as for carbon sequestration and offsetting the impacts of climate change. We kind of focused our testimony today on our traditional message. And we feel that if we were to move forward, so chlorpyrifos is in its final review at the national level. Neonicotinoids are also in the final year of the review at the national and state. I believe there's a state review going on, and a report is being submitted to DEP and to the General Assembly with recommendations on the actual impacts of the use. And I think there's a lot more information, and it would be much more effective if we had this conversation with DEP, the Environment Committee, the Agricultural Experiment Station, representatives from industry and people from UConn, and really looked and see, are there ways, what are the actual impacts, right? So I've heard comments about the heavy use of chlorpyrifos on golf courses that couldn't be further from the truth. It is rarely used on golf courses. It's used for one pest primarily, which would be applied once, maybe twice a year. as a last case resort. There has been multiple references to chlorpyrifos threatening adjacent properties or eventually finding its way into waterways. I have seen no information that directly connects applications on golf courses to these risks, even though there is an inherent risk associated with the chemical itself. And in fact, I reached out to Zachary Donace at DEP asking if there had been any complaints registered regarding chlorpyrifos use on golf courses, and he says he can remember none as long as he's been in the agency. So when chlorpyrifos is used, you're very well aware that it has been applied, which is one of the reasons that most golf course superintendents have moved away to other products. And the fact that he has not a single report demonstrates that these applications do not pose the risk to adjacent properties that have been claimed in these hearings and in years prior.
Thank you for that answer. It's very informative, and I appreciate your testimony today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Harding. And Mr. Gorman, you and I have had this conversation before, but just in your testimony tonight, you were saying that it's rarely used on golf courses. And I remember that when we had this bill before the committee in the past, at the beginning of that legislative session, I think actually initially the golf courses were on board, and then there was some language shifts and things sort of changed as the session went on. And I'm just curious, is there any reason why the golf courses wouldn't support a ban on chlorpyrifos if it's not really being used, and if there are alternatives to pest control on golf courses?
I was speaking with the Golf Course Superintendent Association multiple times this week. And it's not so much that they were in support of this issue. It was that they chose not to oppose it in favor of other issues that might come down the line that are more prominent. And therefore, and again, a lot of them say, well, I don't use chlorpyrifos that much. Again, the majority of golf courses, if you look at, because if you remember 2 years ago, the banned chlorpyrifos group put together a graphic that showed with little starbursts locations where all the locations where chlorpyrifos was used throughout the state, and it graphically demonstrated how many places. And golf courses were the vast majority, because in the early 2000s, the manufacturers of chlorpyrifos voluntarily removed the turf and the landscape and ornamental turf applications from the registration as part of the review process. So they voluntarily took it out because they didn't need that as part of their business plan. But this is still a valuable product to a certain number of superintendents. Again, it's not your first alternative. It's not your first option. It might be your last. It's your break glass in case of emergency. I talked to a number of golf course superintendents, and they said, yes, I used it because I wanted to get it off my shelf. And in fact, applying it over, a certain quantity of the product over a large area, over a couple of acres. So if you sprayed your greens, the highest profile area, you might spray 2 to 4 acres. And that's actually the most effective way to dispose of it, because you're diluting it, you're applying it over a larger area, and then the microbes can break that down within the thatch and then with the soil microbiome. So I have yet to see any evidence that this product is leaching beyond the location where it's applied. I actually have seen research where products that are applied to straight sand root zones, which would reflect a putting green on a golf course, and 4 inches of water was applied to a column of sand, that the product did not move beyond that sand profile, and that was in a research setting. So these things you don't just apply these haphazardly. They don't just flow off the surface. They're very targeted. They're part of a very
Excuse me,
detailed.
Mr. Gorman, just one moment. I want to hear what you're saying. And unfortunately, there's some folks who are not muted. So if everybody could mute themselves. The host muted me as well. Anyway, go ahead, Mr. Gorman. I'm sorry.
I guess I think there's a disconnect between the way the products are actually being applied and the perception of the risk that they're presenting to the environment and to the communities. And I would rather than resolve these issues in an open public forum like this, because we have information going back and forth, but I think it would be much more effective if the groups came together and were able to look at it. And again, chlorpyrifos is in its final review at the national level. I would not be surprised if the regulatory agencies, as part of the review process, scaled back and removed the registration for the remaining uses. I would not be surprised, because again, this is exactly what Rachel Carson asked for in Silent Spring. Utilize less toxic products that require lower use rates. So the older products were ounces per 1,000 square feet. The new products that we utilize are ounces per acre. So you're talking about a 40-fold decrease in the quantity of the products that need to be applied. They are much more targeted in their and selective in the species that they affect. Many of the newer products pose zero threat to human health. There are new products out there that can be ingested by humans and have zero impact. But when they are ingested by the target pest, there's an enzyme that converts the molecule into the pesticide. That's the level of technology that we are moving towards. And these products will continue to be replaced as those replacement products become more readily available and more affordable.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gorman. At any rate, it sounds like this is not the first line of defense for
No,
golf courses.
it
That
certainly isn't.
there are alternatives here. Okay, Representative Dillon, you had a question for Mr. Gorman?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. It's been a long day, so I don't want to engage in any dispute right now, but you have made a lot of claims, and there is a golf course in my district which is an ongoing source of discussion about pesticides, and New Haven is a downstream community as well. So whenever this committee or the General Assembly engages in protection of any activity, whether it's agriculture or open space or whatever, it may very well end up in our harbor, and restrict our uses. So I'm really pleased that you're here. But some of the things that you were saying, I'd really like to you to provide the committee with some backup. And I understand you said you didn't want to discuss it in public. I assume I won't be in a small discussion, and my constituents won't be either. And they really like information, because whatever products were used 10 or 20 years ago may very well still be affecting the groundwater around their homes. And so any backup information that you haven't provided in your testimony would be very helpful if you would supply it to the committee.
Absolutely. Your audio wasn't very good, but I got the gist of what you're saying, and I'd be happy to have provide any information that I could. And in fact, I would be happy to set up a meeting with you and the superintendent from the golf course in your district, so that you could see firsthand, what exactly the nature of his uses are, and kind of, because I feel that a lot of times we find ourselves in these situations where people are on opposite sides of an issue. We saw that all day long today, whether it was trash removal, tires, pesticides, invasive species. You see people on both sides. I always like to try and start from position where we have common ground. We all want to protect the environment. And I think that by
Thank
having.
you. If you could provide some background first,
Sure.
One of the people who actually created a lot of ruckus in my district used to work at that golf course and retired and went door to door. So I don't know if that would always be helpful. I think it would be easier if we started out with some of the remarks that you made this evening and provide us with some background information. Now, if my audio is as poor as it indicates, I've been working on 3 computers at once today, and I apologize for this unfortunately is the smallest and the weakest, but they held up pretty well. And so anything that you could provide us on to back up some of the claims that you've made would be tremendously helpful. And I think, as I said, it's a downstream community. Frankly, the runoff from any golf course would be of concern, whether it's in the 92nd district or somewhere else. People would be worried about. They ask me a lot of questions about agricultural runoff and so forth. And we were limited from doing development in the New Haven Harbor years ago. Pretty happy if you could begin by providing that to the committee, and I'm sure the chairs of the committee would share all of that with us, and that would give us a starting point. And thank you very much, Madam Chair.
I'm going to just cut you off there. I think I let you go, even though the audio was a little bit garbled because we were catching the lag and getting caught up as it went along. But I think the gist of it is, Mr. Foreman, if you could provide us, if you want to provide some information to our clerk, Gaia McDermott, she can then share it with the committee, which would be helpful as we are debating this information. And certainly, I think Representative Dillon would appreciate any outreach to her directly, I'm sure, as you offered. That's very nice of you. Representative O'Day, did you have another?
No, I was just going to say, God bless you, Representative Horn. It seems like she may be allergic to the talk of pesticides. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much, sir, for your
paying
testimony.
attention.
You're being watched, Representative Horn. Lots of sneezing going on. All right, well, thank you so much, Mr. Gorman. I don't see any other questions from the committee. I appreciate your feedback.
Thank you very much.
Okay, next we have Naisha McCauley.
Yes, thank you so much. Welcome and good evening, everyone. I am Naisha McCauley. I'm a registered voter in Hartford, and I'm speaking actually in opposition to SB 115. And I know we've heard a lot. If you've been here since 10 o'clock this morning, you've already heard a lot on this issue. I am not an expert. This is not my subject matter expertise by any stretch. My expertise is actually in civic engagement and dialogue. So I just want to shout out everyone and applaud us all for democracy in action. So that's also something I'm paying attention to and would love to analyze at the end of this pandemic how Zoom has impacted our civic engagement. But that's not why we're here today. You've already heard how and debated, I guess, the issue around the increased cost. And so I'm just lending my voice to in that regard as this bill is being considered in the impact of that direct cost to the consumer. And I guess the one thing that I will say that I haven't really heard mentioned in the debate today is the behavioral economics of this, and how I think at any point along this discussion, there is a cost. And so whether that cost is directly felt at the consumer, direct consumer level, or is that cost felt at the municipality level, understanding the behavioral economics and how residents feel the cost of that is the only thing I want to add to this discussion, in that analyzing where the cost is felt is going to make a difference, because the tipping fees and things like that don't necessarily directly correlate to a resident of a town, but they absolutely feel the cost at the store, at their wallet. And so I just would say, if it is true that this does increase costs, where the consumer or the resident feels that cost is important. And so that's all I wanted to add to this discussion. So thank you, everyone.
Well, I certainly appreciate you taking the time, Naisha, and you had to wait a long time to testify. So I really appreciate your patience with that as well, and your advocacy on this and other matters, because it sounds like you are civically engaged. So thank you for that. I don't see any other questions or comments from committee members. So again, thank you. Next, we have Dustin Nelson. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Dustin Nelson of Vernon, Connecticut. Senator Cohen, Representative Gresco, Senator Slapp, Representative Tom, ranking members, and members of the Environment Committee. I serve as the president for the Connecticut Nursery and Landscape Association, a collaboration of over 300 businesses. The Connecticut green industry accounts for 51% of agriculture production in our state, with a total job impact of 43,000 jobs and an annual economic impact of $4.7 billion. I also serve as the Nursery and Landscape Representative on the Invasive Plants Council that was established in 2003. And I'm here to suggest tabling House Bill 5143, an act concerning an Office of Aquatic Invasive Species. The position of invasive plant coordinator has historically been housed at the University of Connecticut and should continue to remain at UConn. The role was first established in 2009 and ran through June of 2015 until funding ran out and the position was vacated. 2 people served as the coordinator during this time. Position responsibilities of the coordinator were divided between DEEP and UConn Department of Plant Science and Landscape Architecture. Due to the lack of funding that ended in 2015, this position has since remained unfilled. However, currently, DEEP and UConn have been developing a memorandum of understanding for the invasive plants coordinator position, according to the 2021 Invasive Plants Council annual report. There's no need to duplicate efforts, especially in a short session. The information about the Invasive Plant Council and Connecticut Invasive Plants Working Group are both hosted and managed by UConn Extension. Funding for the coordinator would be supplied via Public Act 19-190, the invasive species sticker, which requires an invasive species stamp for the operation of a motorboat on Connecticut waters. Funding for this position will be renewed annually, and because the funds are for this vitally important position are primarily from aquatic source, that will be the main focus of the educational aspect. However, the terrestrial invasive plants are just as problematic, and the intention is to seek alternative funding to support terrestrial invasive education. And CNLA and the Invasive Plant Council advocates for an extension of the municipal preemption related to the regulations of invasive plants, which expired on October 1st of 2014. More can be seen in my written testimony regarding that. Thank you for considering tabling House Bill 5143.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dustin, for your testimony. I see our Vice Chair, Representative Palm, has a question for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. It's my understanding that the position you're referring to is a line item in DEEP for $100,000. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
And what would prevent an office of invasive species from liaising and working with this one position?
It would cause for just confusion, and it would make coordinating efforts much harder to have a invasive plants coordinator for our state housed between Deep and Yukon, and then having a separate office of aquatic invasives at the agricultural experiment station. So we're looking for just a cohesive approach to the invasive plant problem in our state.
Well, I agree that there should be a cohesive approach. I think that an office probably has a better chance of doing that, especially since the intent of the invasive species stamp was not to fund a position, and certainly not at UConn, but rather to do grants and public education. So I think both are needed, but I appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Callahan, are you all set now?
Rep. Palm asked the question I was going to ask. I would only make a comment, Madam Chair, that we are collecting quite a bit of money on the invasive species through aquatics through registrations, boat regs. But as far as out of state, Deep is still collecting very, very little. Last year it was only about $5,000. So having grants to combat aquatic invasives would be great, but we really have to, Deep really has to step up and collect those out-of-state fees in order to have the funds available. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative. All right, thank you so much for your testimony, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Adam Pierce.
Good afternoon, chairs and members. My name is Adam Pierre, and I'm with the American Chemistry Council, and very excited to be with you this evening, and understand that my colleague Craig testified a little earlier on EPR and got to share with you about advanced recycling. I'm here to testify very respectfully opposed to Senate Bill 118 that deals with polystyrene. ACC and its members care deeply about creating a more circular economy for plastics. But in our view, this bill misses the marks for three reasons. First of all, we hold that it will reduce landfilling, and unfortunately will not reduce litter, and will increase costs both the state and schools. Plastic weighs up to 4 times lighter than other alternatives, and the infrastructure for other alternatives is not there, and unfortunately that will lead to increased landfilling. It will not reduce litter. It will only reduce the material that's littered and doesn't really address the root cause of litter. And lastly, increased costs for schools and states. In the past, we've submitted state-specific data showing the increased costs. Recently in Virginia, we conducted a study that was very similar to this piece of legislation, where it showed a $10 to $15 million in increase in public costs. And we believe there would be similar increased costs in the private sector. And the other reason why we think this bill misses the marks is there's so many other good alternatives out there to increase circularity. My colleague Craig a little earlier today talked about advanced recycling. And advanced recycling has made polystyrene one of the most recyclable plastics, and the infrastructure for advanced recycling is growing. Some of the things that I've talked about, there's a very robust bibliography in the testimony I submitted, and a little bit earlier this year in Ecuador, a study came out that talked about how increasing the circular economy for polystyrene was the preferable option compared to other options. And the other thing that I want to share with the group, because there was some talk about sortation, and even when you do recycle, there's still a certain amount of residual that ends up in the landfill. And one of the things that we're doing in the Northeast is we're actually conducting a secondary sortation audit to see if secondary sortation technology makes sense for the Northeast. And the really cool thing about secondary sortation technology is it takes that residual that would normally go to a landfill that comes out of recycler processes it again, and brings even more items into circularity. And this is all materials. In the study in the town that we studied in the Pacific Northwest, we hold that we're able to divert 100 million more pounds of material. We're able to increase recovery rates up to 3% without big program changes, generate dozens of green jobs, and very importantly, enable future expansion of curbside materials. So you're able to expand the list of that, which is collected curbside. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Pierre, thank you for your patience and thank you for your testimony. I don't see any hand up in the room, so we are going to move on to the next testifier. Again, thanks for your patience. We are going to hear now from the first selectman of Bristol, Matt Knickerbocker. He is taking the slot that was earmarked for Betsy Guerra. Matt?
Thank you very much. By the way, that's
Bethel.
Bethel. That's all right.
What did I say?
You said Bristol, but that's okay.
Oh, geez. I was reading the Bristol recovery thing before. I'm sorry.
That's all right. They both start with a B. I get confused with Bethany too, so that's all right. But Senator Cohen, Representative Gresco, good evening, and thank you very much for the opportunity. And Representative Harding, great to see you. Representative is my home district.
Good evening.
So good to see you. I am here today to testify on behalf of both COST, Town of Bethel, and in my role as co-chair of CCSMM, the Connecticut Coalition for Sustainable Material Management. And I'm testifying in strong support of the three EPR bills, HB 5142, 5139. Those are gas cylinders and tires respectfully, and SB 115, which is I'm gathering, a rather controversial producer responsibility on packaging. I have submitted formal written testimony, so I'm not going to read that. I think Representative O'Day asked a great question just a few minutes ago when he said that we have had a day of very conflicting information. And I think that is probably an understatement. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes trying to bring back some data and remind the committee of some of the things we worked on. As co-chair of CCSMM, one of my responsibilities was heading up the EPR working group. So for the past 18 months, we've done a very deep dive into the data. And I'm just going to touch on some of the things I've heard today because the data that we have, the studies that we have that we worked with are very, very different than some of the things I heard today. Number one, the studies that we have, and I will be very happy to share this with the committee, do not show an impact on consumer prices with EPR for packaging. In fact, we can find no correlation at all in the data, and this comes from British Columbia and Alberta. Number two, the program that we're considering here in Connecticut will save communities conservatively $40 million annually in costs. And this is a very major, a very significant cost savings for municipalities, which translate directly into consumer budgets. Now, when you combine the two, I've heard many people state today that they worry about the impact of cost increases on vulnerable populations, on distressed communities. I believe there is no correlation there at all. And in fact, if Connecticut municipalities can relieve themselves of $40 million per year of costs, that's money that can go back into those communities for education, community support, and many other worthwhile projects. For many years now, municipalities have borne the burden of managing waste and recyclables. I've heard people state today that this is trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. And I can tell you this problem is already here. We are already watching the impact of a waste and recycling crisis. And yes, Connecticut does a good job of recycling, but to say that we're one of the best in the nation that lags the rest of the world, I don't think is a very good place to be, and we can do much better than that. So I'll conclude just by saying that this is not a new thing. Many of our representatives and senators today might think from what you've heard that this is some exotic plan. These are programs that have had decades of success around the world and is now coming in very successfully to the United States. One last thing, I heard today that the British Columbia experiment was called a failure. The data I have, which again I'll share, the 5-year data indicates that recycling rates there went from 55% pre-EPR to 76% and is still continuing to hold steady. So these are things that we need to do to reduce the waste stream and make things more efficient. I also want to say that I do not see...
Knickerbocker, I'm sorry, but your time is up.
Okay, thank you very much. If anybody has questions, I'd be glad to answer.
That was my line.
You. Thank you, First Selectman Knickerbocker. It does look like your Senator Haskell is waiting to ask a question.
Okay. Hello, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Matt, it's so good to see you. Thanks for your patience today, testifying so late in the evening. And also, I'm thrilled that you're adding your voice to this conversation, because all day, as we've been hearing criticism of extended producer responsibility, I've been curious how you would react to those. So your testimony was comprehensive. I just have one question to add, which is that we've heard again and again that this is trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. And we've heard about the potential cost to consumers. And then we've heard about from municipalities, the cost savings to municipalities. Can you walk us through whether it's at large in Connecticut or in your town of Bethel, the cost of inaction, what it would look like if we decide to do nothing, given the increasingly challenging market for recyclables across the globe? What would it look like if the legislature fails to do anything?
Well, that just means higher costs for everybody. That means higher cost in municipal budgets for those towns that have subscription or some kind of a municipal program. It means higher cost in consumer wallets with money coming out of their pockets. It means more trash being, as we watch Mira get ready to shut down, we will see more trash go into landfills, which everybody knows is not a sustainable solution. We're actually going backwards from where we were 20, 30 years ago, when we started building waste to energy plants to not fill the landfills with trash. And now as those things age out and there's no new investment, there has to be a better solution. And the only realistic way to do this is to reduce the amount of trash that's going into the system. We know from experience that somewhere between 25 and 35% of municipal waste could be recycled if there is an incentive to do so. That is a significant savings. And one of the things we're not even talking about is food composting and other organics. That's another way to reduce trash. But EPR is a great step in the right direction. I know it will force some changes, but haulers will not go out of business no matter what. Things still need to be hauled. MRFs will not go out of business. Even if manufacturers design their products to be more easily recycled, it still has to be picked up. It still has to go to a MRF to be sorted and go on to the next phase. So the fear that I hear about these things impacting business, I think is very much overblown. I don't think these folks have anything to worry about. Will there be adjustments? Sure. When isn't there? All businesses have to adjust to changing market conditions, but will they go away? Absolutely not. In fact, the studies show that there could be an increase in jobs with EPR.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much, First Selectman Knickerbocker. It sounds to me as though there would be both an environmental cost, but also a very real fiscal cost to inaction. So really appreciate your testimony. And Mr. Chair, thanks for the time.
Thank you. And next we have a question from Representative O'Day.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Knickerbocker, for your testimony and your perspective as a selectman in Bethel or Bristol, but wherever. It's late on a Friday. I've got to try and lighten the mood a little. So, I am looking forward to taking a look at the data that you're going to send in. It still seems as though we're gonna have to weigh conflicting data. Would you agree if the data does show a 4 to 9% increase to consumers, and a decrease in recycling, that would be disconcerting to you. That would be it would be at least contradictory to the data you've seen.
It would not, it would be both. Yes, it would be disconcerting and contradictory because we have had in this process in running the EPR working group, diving into the data, we dug hard. We looked for everything. I mean, we were not looking for data to support preconceived notions. We were looking for solutions. And I can tell you that, frankly, I have seen nothing until today when I heard some of this testimony. I saw nothing that contradicted what I just told you folks. So I would look forward to looking at that data and analyzing it to see if it's valid. But I'll be glad to share, and I'll be glad to discuss this with you offline. Sure.
Thank you. And did you take a look at the task force report that was discussed earlier from 2016 and 2017?
Yes, I read that very thoroughly. The thing that I would say to in response to the task force report is the world has changed a great deal since 2016. That was pre-China sword, and that was pre-Mira. Before the announcement that the Mira plant was going to be shutting down. And I might also mention that the Wheelabrator plant in Bridgeport is probably, they haven't made an announcement. That's now owned by a different company, but that's probably not far behind. Those plants are all about the same age, and they're not getting any younger, and they're not getting any more efficient. So I would have to take the 2016 report and say, at the very least, it's time to put a task force together and do it again, because the assumptions in that, I think, are impacted by the reality that we've seen since then.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative O'Day. Senator Minor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Matt. So 2016, I think, predates any of the changes on Murphy Road and predates the development of a food to energy facility in Southington, predates a glass reuse facility down in the valley, improvements to strategic materials. I would agree with you that maybe it's time to look again at what the benefit might be. I still think the solution here is somewhere between the curb and the ultimate end use. And if we can't figure out how to change the way the system works at the curb, the only thing EPR may do is embed the cost somewhere and provide an opportunity for towns to reduce a line item perhaps, but there's no guarantee, knowing what I know about municipal government, that I think you would agree, there's no guarantee that's going to necessarily equate to reduced taxes. So I would join you in thinking that maybe we ought to take a look again, given our current infrastructure and what is kind of in the pipeline, and try and figure out how to use that better before we maybe jump to an EPR, a full-blown EPR program. What do you think of that?
Well, I see these as a couple of separate issues. I don't see this as an infrastructure issue with how we're recycling today. As I've heard many people say today, we're number 5 in the nation in terms of our recycling efficiency. But really, what we're talking about is having manufacturers take some responsibility for the cost of the life cycle of the product and its packaging, most importantly, its packaging, and share some of that cost with the goal of making it more efficient and reducing it. And I'll share one story with you very quickly. Before I entered public service, I was on a business trip. This is probably about 2005, 2006 in Germany. And I was at a store. I was doing a study on retail practices in the consumer electronics business. And I watched a person buy a big screen TV, and the folks in the store took it out to the car and took it out of the box and put it in the car. Then they took the box and the styrofoam and the plastic, and they carried it back in. So that material went back to the distributor to be reused. So these are the kind of things that can take cost out of the system, lower the cost overall for everybody concerned, And it really is outside of that realm of what happens at the curb. What happens at the curb is still going to happen at the curb. We're still going to have MSW pickup. We're still going to have recycling pickup. That's not impacted. What we're talking about is that the circular economy, the circular manufacturing, where products are designed to be more recyclable. And with the data that I've seen, with recycling rates going up, it actually gives the MRFs and the recycling market more to work with and a better product because it's designed to be recycled right from the start. You're muted.
I join the chairman in thanking you for your resilience in listening all day and being a part of the conversation.
Thank you very much. It's been fascinating.
Thank you, Senator Minor, and seeing no more hands. Thank you for your patience and for your perspective on this issue. We're going to move on next to Scott Smith, followed by April Regan.
Thank you, Representative Gresco, and I applaud, I salute the stamina of you and your colleagues. This has been an amazing day. I'll be brief. Friends of Animals commends the Environment Committee for once again raising legislation that addresses the harm caused by toxic pesticides to humans, pets, pollinators, wildlife, waterways, all by taking up State Bill 120. I'm proud to know that in 2005, Connecticut became the first state in the nation to prohibit the use of all toxic lawn care pesticides on school athletic fields serving grades K through 6, as well as at daycare centers. We later expanded the original law to include middle school fields. 17 years ago, the legislature embraced this holistic change by eliminating a broad range of toxic pesticides. Friends of Animals fully supports the new language for SB 120 submitted by Beyond Pesticides with regard to banning the use of neonics. We urge the state to continue to lead by example by adding further language to SB 120 to ban all toxic pesticides on state public lands. The state already has what experts consider a model policy for its municipal playgrounds. The law is part of the general statutes, so Connecticut could simply expand the current law by including state parks and lands within the outlined restrictions in that section. There's local precedents as well. Last fall, as we've heard today, Stanford passed an ordinance restricting toxic pesticide use on public spaces and establishing a list of permanently banned toxic synthetic products, none of which are allowed under federal organic law. Stanford's organic policy also recognizes the dangers posed by synthetic fertilizers, both to the climate and due to nutrient runoff to local waterways. Please take the fastest, surest route to eliminating toxic pesticides in our state. The data continues to pile up about what North America's ecosystems have to lose if you don't. Without bees, butterflies, insects, birds, and other wildlife, there would be no ecosystems, there would be no us. Connecticut is praised nationwide for its environmental leadership, for its gutsiness in saying no to toxic pesticides. Please help the state live up to its reputation by voting for SB 120 with a strengthening amendment to ban the use of all toxic pesticides on state public lands. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony and for, again, your persistence and patience with us. I don't see any hand raised in the room. So again, thank you for your testimony, and we're going to move on to April Regan, followed by Margot Burns.
Thank you so much. Good evening. Thank you to the committee for sticking with us throughout this long day. It's clear that there's a big need for public conversation and discourse around Senate Bill 115. My name is April Regan. I'm a resident of Connecticut, a licensed attorney in Connecticut, and the sustainability and outreach specialist at USA Hauling and Recycling. I have many concerns with SB 115, but I'm speaking today on the grounds that EPR for packaging doesn't achieve the environmental objectives that it claims to achieve. In fact, EPR has been proven to increase the cost of recycling while ultimately recycling fewer tons. Some of the numbers that Matt Nickenbacker referenced are because BC includes waste to energy in the recycling and diversion rate, which artificially inflates those numbers compared to what Connecticut counts as diversion. But my main point tonight is that decisions should be made based in data. Connecticut has not done a waste characterization study since 2015. And since that, we've implemented many recycling initiatives, such as creating the Recycle CT Foundation, updating the bottle bill, municipal grants, private investment in AD and recycling, and many more. Connecticut should not implement more new programs without a baseline for our current waste diversion based on these new programs that we've already implemented. Additionally, EPR systems around the world have failed to impact packaging design. Voluntary designs for increased sustainability in marketing have been much more effective at reducing packaging. EPR does not increase recycling. Connecticut, as you've heard, is ranked in the top 5 states for recycling based on numerous studies, and already has one of the highest diversion rates of any state. Whereas the British Columbia system is recycling fewer tons every year, and their costs continue to increase. Lastly, it's hard to even calculate effectiveness when EPR systems are inherently not transparent. And it can be difficult to determine the effectiveness even with annual reports. Any system in which the supposedly regulated group is in charge of their own goal setting, their own data tracking, and their own cost structure will not effectively and transparently change that system, manage that system. So in summary, I urge you to please base sweeping environmental policy decisions on data as opposed to ineffective, unproven trends, especially when it will financially impact Connecticut residents. I welcome any questions now or at a follow-up after the hearing, because this is too massive of a policy overhaul to be made without looking at all the available data. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, April, and thank you for continuing our roller coaster here of one testimony telling us it's the next best thing since sliced bread, and the next person telling us, oh no, that data is all wrong and this data is the correct data. So I think I speak for all of my colleagues when I say it's going to be a lot of reading in our near future, but you have some questions. First from Senator Haskell.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Regan, thank you for your patience in today's hearing. You mentioned that your position is a sustainability and outreach specialist. And I guess what I'm wondering, or what I feel is currently maybe missing from your testimony, is what is this proposed alternative? You mentioned a moment ago that you don't believe there is a problem in Connecticut, but we just heard just 2 minutes ago, 4 minutes ago, perhaps, from a municipal leader who said that his costs are increasing and that's going to result either in a cut to services in town or an increase in taxes in town. So I guess my question is, what is the proposed solution to this problem, if not extended producer responsibility?
So I want to start by saying we're not quite sure how extensive the problem even is, because there has not been a study since 2015 telling us what our waste is made out of. If there are recyclables making up the MSW, the most effective way to get those recyclables out of the MSW is education and enforcement. What we've been doing, as a state, is we created the Recycle CT Foundation to help unify the narrative around recycling, help make outreach and education on recycling more accessible. And we have no current way to tell if that's working. Now, we also have private investment in recycling facilities, not just Murphy Road, but 2 other MRFs in the state are upgrading their equipment as well. We have more end markets coming online. So the needle is moving, but we're not sure how much. And one of the most effective things actually that would help move the needle is creating recycled content legislation, which was, passed last session as a bill to explore, do a study, and that's yet to happen. So we have all of these programs out there, but we don't know if they're effective. We don't know what needs to change. We don't know where we stand currently because we're all working off data from 2015 in the state.
Understood. Thank you so much. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Next question from Representative O'Day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just real quick, April, you heard testimony from Selectman Knickerbocker, and you also heard, well, did you hear the testimony from Dr. Lacken?
I've been here all day. I've heard it all.
So what would you, how would you respond to what appears to be conflicting information we've got regarding data from Mr. Castle, who agreed with Mr. Knickerbocker, and Dr. Lacken, and speaker number 75, whose name I still need to look up?
I think when you look at data, you have to consider the source. And the source for the data that I myself and other people have stated have been independent studies done by York University. Chaz Miller, who is an expert internationally renowned in the recycling space, his studies and other studies have come out from, proponents of EPR who benefit from the system, or from the recycled BCs and Ontario systems themselves, which, as I stated, don't necessarily have to be transparent with their data because they are the only PROs, they are the only ones with the information. So I would use that to justify kind of the differences.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would appreciate, Ms. Regan, if you could send us that information if you have anything to add. I appreciate it. I've got your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Muczynski.
I didn't hear what you said, Mr. Chairman.
Your hand was up, Mary.
Yes, I didn't hear you calling me. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I wanted to ask Ms. Regan, what do we do with the tons that are going to the mirror plant when it shuts down in a year?
So education and enforcement are going to be the most important ways to kind of take as many possible recyclables out of MSW and get them into recycling as possible. That's really the most effective way, seen all around the world. Education is very important for reducing MSW and increasing recyclables.
Okay, but can you honestly say that everything that's in the trash stream now can go into the blue bin? Can you honestly say that?
I think there are other ways to divert waste as well. The state is investing in food composting pilots in municipalities, which we have yet to see play out because it was just introduced. But if there are items that can be effectively recycled in the MSW, if we can get those out and get them into the blue bin, they will be recycled.
Well, we shall see. We have about a year left. It's been very tough to get the constituents to put everything in the blue bin. They put stuff in there that doesn't belong there, dirty diapers, plastic film, carpeting, all kinds of stuff that can't really be recycled. They really can't. And the only solution right now for all of our municipalities is to send it to a waste energy plant, what is not in the recycle bin. So we're talking on a very short time frame all of our towns are going to run up against this big problem. I don't think what you're saying is realistic, that we're going to retrain everybody and change all the garbage from now till next year, and it's going to magically solve itself. I don't see that. I hope you can work with us on a realistic way of managing the waste in the very short time we have left. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative. Next, we have a question from Representative Gillen. Pat, there you go.
Thank you. The audio is an issue today, but I guess a comment, given the shortness of the time frame, I'm very concerned that a study would be a delay tactic, and that would avoid the magnitude of what we're looking at. I can remember working on the landfill issue as a local official, and although it was, I really don't think people, unless there's something I don't understand about the closing of that facility, and the alarming news now tonight from Mr. Knickerbocker about Bridgeport. I think we should think of a middle ground. If people are troubled about this bill, they have no idea what we're facing if we start losing the capacity we have now. And I don't think kicking it to the individual consumer is adequate. I think we should think of another way to share the responsibility. And I certainly respect the viewpoint that you're saying, ma'am, but I don't. It's not realistic at all, given the time and given the volume that's being handled. And so I don't have an answer in my pocket, but I do appreciate your coming, and hope that we could move a little bit away from your position and closer towards the bill. And if the bill doesn't do it, somewhere in between.
Well, if I may respond to that, so Mira shut down for multiple months a couple years ago, and nobody saw, consumers didn't see missed pickups, nobody saw trash piling up. The series of transfer stations and the networks we have for disposal of MSW in the state were able to cushion that and manage all of the material that Mira was not able to process. So if we close Mira, we still have places for MSW to go. We still have environmentally friendly, health and safety friendly ways to deal with MSW. So I think it's just important to note that we have that proof when we are closed.
Mr. Chairman, with the latitude of understanding it's really unfair to everyone else,
Yes.
it would be helpful then if we could include in that calculation the alarming prospect of Bridgeport, if that's no longer available as well. And I understand, ma'am, why you're saying that. I can't test that at this point. I don't know that, but it seems to me we're going to lose existing capacity, and we need to figure out how to fix it. And maybe we need more information about Bridgeport and British Columbia, which I hadn't anticipated, and that would be helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative. Seeing no other hands raised in the room, April, thank you for your patience and for your testimony.
Thank you so much.
Next, we're going to go to Margot Burns, followed by Rob McLucky.
Yes, hello, everyone. Thank you, co-chairs Cohen and Gresco and honorable members of the Environment Committee for the opportunity to provide testimony. My name is Margot Burns. I'm the Senior Environmental Planner at the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments. RiverCog is in full support of the proposed House Bill 5143. Although we would like the committee to consider some additions, we hope for support of adequate funding not only for this proposed office of the existing Connecticut Agricultural Experiment Station Invasive Aquatic Plant Program, but for the Connecticut Deep to greatly expand its very good clean drain and dry program and boat ramp steward training program, including increased public education, signage, and boat washing stations. Funding options that might help could include a special license plate or similar program just to fund aquatic invasive species education and spread prevention. The communities of the Lower Connecticut River Valley are concerned about the threat of many invasive species, but one of our greatest concerns is the pervasive aquatic invasive plant, hydrilla verticillata, and the unprecedented threat it poses to devastate the Connecticut River and its globally significant freshwater and brackish tidal coves and tributaries, as well as very nearby and far away recreational lakes and public drinking water supplies. The 2016 RiverCog report, Valuing Regional Assets, a Strategic Framework for Economic Development, prepared by the Yukon Connecticut Center for Economic Analysis, valued the annual benefit for the Lower Connecticut River Valley region from marinas at $19.7 million. And because the marinas are of significant value to those outside the region, at the state level, their annual amenity value jumps to $102.3 million. RiverCog helped establish that this is a new variety of the plant, not found elsewhere in the United States. It has characteristics unto itself that we are encouraged by and hope these will allow and ease its control. As this plant has colonized our most prized ecological and recreational estuarine and river assets of the state and our region in just a few years, many partners have worked together to gather the necessary data to begin the planning and research that will allow future mitigation and hopeful eradication of the most feared of invasive plants before it spreads to other water bodies of our state in the Northeast. In addressing this threat, we also address the threats of other aquatic invasive species. This office will leverage and allow for the necessary coordination of resources from all levels of government that will be necessary to have a successful hydrilla management and aquatic invasive program. Successful programs are currently being carried out in other states, including just over our western border in New York in the Croton River, a tributary of the Hudson River just north of New York City. Please support the protection of our states in the Northeast economy, ecology, public drinking, and recreational waters, and the creation and funding of this office within the Agricultural Experiment Station. RiverCog thanks the committee for its time and attention to this most significant issue.
Thank you, Margot. And we have a couple of questions for you. First from Representative Paris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Margot, thank you so much for your testimony. Greatly appreciate all the work that you're doing. Just a quick question for you. Have you seen a lot of change or spread since you've been working on the river?
Of the hydrilla?
Yes.
Yes, significantly. I've been working on the river water chestnut since 2011. We first saw significant quantities in my region in the lower river in 2018. And it was very pervasive down to the Middletown area, which was the most northern area that I worked in that year. And since 2018, let's see, we discovered that it had spread not as much as in the Middletown area, but all the way down sparsely to the East Haddam State Boat Ramp. Since then, the hydrilla has covered our coves, including the Salmon Cove, Salmon River, Selden Cove. The Mattabasset is entirely covered with it in July and August. So yes, it spread prolifically throughout the lower river in just a few years.
Thank you for that, Margot. I have other questions, but I'll reserve the rest of the time to my colleagues, which I'm sure they'll probably ask the same questions I'm looking to have answered. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative. Next is Representative Palm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Margot, thank you so much for staying all day with us. We talk a lot about the effect of hydrilla on the mechanics of boating, whether it's kayaking to larger boats. Can you tell us anything about what the biology of the plant does to the river itself? You mentioned about brackish water in the lower Connecticut, but my understanding is that it has a neurotoxin that affects eagles, that it takes the oxygen out of the water, but I am not a biologist, so or an expert. So can you tell us briefly what dangers it poses other than impeding boating and swimming and progress on the water?
Well, the plant itself it spreads out quite prolifically throughout the water body. So throughout the water column, spreads out across the surface, and it can stagnate water flow. And as far as I know, can increase in areas. It has been researched cyanobacteria blooms, which is a cause of concern for public health.
Thank you. And I know that it was recently discovered in a reservoir in New Canaan. So moving from the tourism and the boating aspect to the public water health is a concern of mine. So thank you. Thank you very much for all your work on this really important subject.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative. Next, a question from Representative Chafee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Margot, for sticking with us tonight. Rep Palm somewhat answered my question, but I was just curious, has hydrilla been found in any other waterways or bodies of water within the state, to your knowledge?
I know that there are a couple of reservoirs that it has been found in. I think it was first found in a pond near Mystic. It's in Coventry Lake that they've been working on for a few years. Now, but this is a different variety of hydrilla than the hydrilla that's in the Connecticut River. The hydrilla in the Connecticut River is a different genotype than any other in the United States, as far as we know. So it has a different biology, and that needs to be further researched. And we hope that the characteristics that it has will make it a little easier to control than the hydrilla that is present in other water bodies. So I really have only worked with the hydrilla in the Connecticut River. It's the agricultural experiment station that has the experience in working with the hydrilla in the other areas, as well as I think Connecticut Deep has been working in Coventry Lake.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative, and seeing no more hands raised. Margot, thank you for your patience and for your testimony. We're going to move on to Rob McLucky, followed by Bruce Bennett.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Gresko, distinguished members of the committee. My name is Robbie McLucky, and I'm the Senior Manager for State and Local Government Affairs with the Consumer Healthcare Products Association in Washington, D.C. We are the trade association representing the makers of over-the-counter medications, dietary supplements, and consumer medical devices. I'm speaking in opposition to Senate Bill 115 as it is currently written. Chair, we submitted detailed written testimony about our concerns, so I'll keep my remarks short. We can certainly appreciate the intent of the legislation. However, I want to point out that consumer healthcare product packaging differs from most product packaging in that our packaging is regulated by the federal government. Packaging for medicine, dietary supplements, and medical devices are all regulated by the Food and Drug Administration to ensure safety of contents, stability of products itself in transport, in storage at retail, and ultimately in the delivery to the end consumer, and even to prevent tampering or adulteration of the product being used by the consumers. Under good manufacturing practices regulations, FDA oversees material examination, usage criteria, packaging and labeling operations, tamper-evident packaging, and even expiration dating. Certain drugs are also regulated by the Consumer Product Safety Commission under the Poison Prevention Packaging Act of 1970. These regulations require manufacturers to provide child-resistant packaging. All of this is to say that federal framework has been in place for decades, and it has served the public interest pretty well. It exists first and foremost for safety. So even if our manufacturers wanted to change packaging tomorrow, they couldn't. We would be required to apply for that change with the FDA, and then we would have to prove that new packaging can withstand the rigors of the mandated testing. That means that this legislation may, in fact, conflict with federal law. It also penalizes consumer healthcare product manufacturers for complying with federal standards, because in most cases, we cannot meet the eco-modulation goals outlined in the bill. We've worked closely with legislators across the country on this issue. In fact, if this bill could be amended to emulate what's being considered in New York or Maryland, Colorado, or even what Washington State will be considering next year, we could be okay with the bill. Unfortunately, the way the bill is currently written, we have to be opposed. So we submitted a specific amendment language in our letter. So I'd encourage any member of the committee to contact us directly with any questions along those lines. But this in generally is the reason for our respectful opposition. Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you for your testimony and for your perseverance today and staying up with us as we near the 12-hour mark. I see Representative O'Day has his hand raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quick, Mr. McLucky, what is it about the Maryland that differentiates why that is acceptable or New York then and Connecticut's not? If you could, just in a sentence.
Well, sure. The sponsors in Maryland on both the Senate and the House bill have agreed that consumer healthcare product packaging is different, is regulated differently, and therefore we should be exempt rather. So they've agreed to accept our exemption language.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you very much, sir. And unlike your name, your number was not very lucky. Thank you.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions being posed to you, thank you for your persistence and for your testimony. We are going to move on to Mike Nadeau, followed by, I believe, Ann Zitkus. Mike Nadeau. Anyone? Bueller? All right. How about?
Sorry, Representative Gresco. I see that the individual signed on 2 different devices. So I just brought in the other device. Maybe that'll release them to be able to speak.
Mike Nadeau. Going once. Going twice.
Chair, it looks like it's under the name of Bruce Bennett also.
Well, Bruce or
Yes.
Mike? There he is. You're muted, though.
I believe that's Ann Zitkus. I unmuted her.
You got to unmute. You have to mute Ann and unmute Bruce or Mike or whomever it is. There he is.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Boy, this has been quite a marathon. I commend you all. So for the record, my name is Mike Nadeau, filling in for Bruce Bennett, who had another engagement and couldn't stay on. So honorable members of the Environment Committee, I would like to comment in support of SB 117, the tree removal bill. I'd like to thank Craig Miner and Maria Horn and Peter Hearn for the work on this that they've done on this. They've given us a lot of help. I'm a retired Connecticut licensed arborist and a member of the Housatonic Meadows Preservation Action, a group of concerned citizens consisting of professionals and academics who specialize in wildlife, ecology, forestry, arboriculture, and related fields. I am also a member of the Sharon Energy and Environment Commission. Our purpose is to support raised bill number 117 with additions. The additions would require DEEP and other state entities to conform to a statewide hazard tree assessment directive. The bill should require DEEP to hire an independent licensed arborist who possesses a hazard tree qualification license that requires the independent arborist to maintain continuing education units specifically for this qualification. It should, more importantly, require knowledge of integrated ecosystem-based management practices. It should also mandate the incorporation of a multidisciplined approach to include biologists, ecologists, foresters, wildlife, and other academic specialists that may be used to make the best determination of hazardous trees. There has been a considerable amount of concern expressed about the poor planning and hiring of individuals designated by DEEP to determine hazard trees in our state parks and along our state and forest roads. This is not a comment on forestry practices, but specifically on the current policy used by DEEP for determining hazardous trees in our public spaces and on our woods roads. The current document we have found dealing with this issue is woefully inadequate with very little detail, as has been stated earlier. It is obvious that the absence of DEEP's training and lack of expertise in this area resulted in the removal of the entire grove of legacy oaks. One of them was 155 years old. The other one was 188 years old. At the Houstonic Meadow State Park, many of which were healthy and were contributing to ecosystem benefits well beyond simple aesthetics. The bill does not address the contemporary views of incorporating integrated ecosystems-based management practices. Factors are carbon accumulation, watershed protection, biodiversity, bird and insect habitat, and so on. This will add additional requirements to the assessment, thereby saving many trees from removal if these practices are included in the final decision. The proposed bill necessitates that a licensed arborist be required to evaluate hazard trees, but having an arborist license in Connecticut does not necessarily qualify an individual to evaluate tree risk holistically. We suggest the following to be considered in the tree removal bill number 117. Number one, the arborist should be required not only
Sorry,
to
Mr.
hold.
No, your time is up.
You're kidding me. I've waited 12 hours and it's done.
I'm sure. I didn't mean to laugh, but I will ask a question. Give me 1 through 3. Go ahead.
The arborist should be required not only to hold a Connecticut arborist license, but also a tree assessment qualification from the International Society of Arboriculture. 2, a section should be added on the integrated ecosystem-based management practices to bring contemporary concepts into the law. This can be supported by the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act by requiring an environmental impact evaluation before any significant action is taken on state property and along our state highways. Posting should not only be placed on trees, but there should be communication with the surrounding town officials to allow them time to notify the citizens of pending action. When the arborist cannot make a determination alone, a multidisciplinary approach should be instituted. We support a moratorium on future tree cutting, except true emergencies, until this is settled. There are approximately 5,000 trees marked as hazardous by DEEP that are at stake. It is incumbent upon DEEP to act as stewards of our public lands and apply up-to-date best practices. In the case of Houstonic Meadow State Park, we find evidence that in a multiplicity of ways, best practices were not followed. Thank you for consideration of our additions to the proposed bill number 117 to avoid the errors of the past. And thank you for letting me finish.
No, thank you for sticking with us, Mike, and your points were well taken. And if you have some more time, Representative Horn has a question.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to lead with the question you just asked, but thank you, Mike, for sticking with us, and thank you to the other Mike and Bruce on the screen. I see Katie also with a similar box, so we get a double whammy there. Really, thank you for your patience and for sticking with this. I just wanted to, so we've had some conversation over the course of the day about, the feasibility of, if the state doesn't have these properly qualified arborists, to work with, to engage third-party, outside arborists. And you have added, the particular good point about making sure that these arborists have hazard tree qualifications. And I wonder whether you could comment on how how widely available is that? And is that, I mean, would it be feasible in your view for DEEP to access and find that level of expertise in the state that they could engage?
Sure. Most tree wardens for towns have hazard tree training. Bruce Bennett is going through it right now through the International Society of Arboriculture. It's a TRAQ, TRAQ, which trains arborists specially for hazard tree assessment.
And just to be clear, that hazard tree assessment, I just want to confirm that that does actually assess, it's not just the health of the tree, but the sort of public safety aspect to that tree in terms of its, whether
Yes.
it causes a danger.
That's number one, is the public safety. But many trees can be pruned or cabled or managed in other ways and not removed. I mean, the vast majority of trees can be saved through this hazard tree assessment.
Thank you. And thank you for your work and for your patience hanging in there to the long day here. So glad to see you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you, everyone.
Mike, one more. Representative Palm has a question.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Nadeau, are you familiar with the SEPA, the Environmental Policy Environment Act that's supposed to, give the public some warning in terms of disasters and imminent danger?
No, I'm not actually familiar with it.
Okay, I wasn't trying to put you on the spot, but we do.
That's all right. I don't feel that way.
Okay, good. We do have in the state, this SEPA, which is supposed to be a process to prevent the kinds of things that happen in Housatonic, and but there is an exemption in it that allows to go around this for agencies to go around this policy.
Yes, I am familiar with that. Yes.
There's an emergency, and I think we need to look at what constitutes an emergency in a state park, because you mentioned the DOT and the roadways, and I thank you for that, because that's of grave concern to me, and I have asked them for a moratorium until we can get some sort of a policy, because these trees are coming down like autumn leaves, really. So
They are.
Thank you for your testimony, for everything you said. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative, and our ranking member, Representative Harding, has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mike, for your testimony and your advocacy here. One of the things that DEEP had been mentioning in relation to Housatonic Meadows was that the trees that they had taken down were all essentially dead or dying. It seems like you've done a lot of research into what went down. Can you talk a little bit about what your observation was into the trees that were taken down and the status of those trees?
Sure. First of all, I was just one of the people that were assessing the trees after they were removed. We did an extensive deep dive at the stumps. We looked at the stumps, and we found some heartwood rot in one. We found some white rot in another, but not enough to because the stumps were probably 3.5 to 4 feet across, not enough to constitute a hazard. What we heard from DEEP was that there was a storm, and a part of a tree came down during the storm, and it was in the picnic area, and it fell into the parking lot. A picnic table was not hurt, the parking lot was not hurt, and there was no one there because it was a storm. The superintendent of that park went and looked at the damage and said all of the trees are hazardous and they must come down. And we tried and tried to stop that, but could not. So there were a number of people that assessed the tree stumps and also the standing trees. There was 80 plus white pines along an access road that were 85 to 90% of them. We marked, I think, 18 trees that maybe should come down. The rest of them all required pruning, and that was it. But they took them all down. And when they did, as soon as they started this monster machine that harvests trees from the ground, 2 mature bald eagles and 1 immature flew out of that pine grove. So nobody ever looked first. And we have time-dated, time-stamped photos of the DEEP personnel pointing to the eagles right when that happened. And it was a real tragedy. So we're not looking for a pound of flesh whatsoever. We're looking for restoration, and we're looking to stop this from happening in the future. The trees were old but healthy, and definitely full of vitality and all kinds of ecosystem services, insects, birds, amazing. 188-year-old white oak, right on the very, very steep bank of the Housatonic River, holding that bank together. They took them all down. It's egregious.
Well, I would agree. And I want to thank you for your testimony and all you've done in this regard. I look forward to working with you on this bill. I think that this bill can go a long way to making sure that something like this never happens again in this state, as it shouldn't. So thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Representative. And again, Mike, thank you for your persistence. And as I said before, your testimony and your points are well taken. And I think you've hit a chord with the committee. We're going to move on to our next speaker, who is Ann Zitkus, followed by Yvonne Davis.
Oh, hello. And I thank very much the Environmental Committee and the representatives for this public hearing. And I fully support Mr. Nadeau's testimony. It's actually very heartbreaking to hear about this in such detail. But I appreciate all of the different bills before the committee, and we really are at a time when we really can't afford to really wait for action on many of these. You have so many important ones before you. When I look at Raise Bill 120, banning neonicotinoids and the polystyrene, and then of course trying to save the horseshoe crabs, 5140, and having an aquatic invasive species office is very important, 5143. But I am also here to speak to the other very important one environmentally. Of course, there are more, but that is Raise Bill 117. And as we probably all know, the cutting down of non-hazardous large trees in public spaces is happening all over Connecticut, and not just, I'm sorry to say, at the Housatonic Meadows State Park. There exists an incentive to take down these trees. Some are profiting while the public is losing greatly when these irreplaceable large trees are cut down, and these are providing priceless ecosystem services, as Mr. Nadeau was listing, and also health benefits. We need to have unbiased, qualified risk assessment experts who are not tied with entities profitable or have another motive to remove trees. We will have to shift some jobs and money to protect and keep these trees alive instead of the public spending money to kill the large trees, which is what is happening right now. And I also would like to bring up an idea, and that is that the Connecticut General Statute 52-557G to 52-557I give liability immunity to landowners who allow recreation on their land as long as they don't charge a fee. And so this applies to governmental landowners as well. And so there seems to be too much of a idea of, like with the Housatonic Meadows incident, of just looking so much as any potential possible hazard and not enough of the benefits. So yes, we can look at different ways of doing this, and we really are paying for these trees to come down, so we could put our money more towards saving them and, assessing everything we need to do to help them. So thank you very much. I see that if my 3 minutes are up. But in any case, the other thing is just that as far as the immunity, that very well could be helpful for saving the trees.
And thank you
I
for
don't know
your
if-
thank you for your testimony and for your persistence on this long day and on this subject. I don't see any hands raised to ask you any questions. So we are going to move on to our next speaker, who is Yvonne Davis, which would be followed by Olivia Regas. Yvonne, go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Yvonne Renee Davis, and I am a resident of Windsor, 25 Phelps Street. And I'd like to say good evening to our chairpersons, our honorable chairpersons. Thank you for the opportunity to present. I too, in concert with the Voices of Women of Color against SB 115. We've heard a lot of testimony throughout the day, making an assurance that the producers will contain the cost of the EPR. But the reality is, in business, that's not so. There's no reality that 100% of this cost would remain with the producers. It always gets passed to the consumer, and the consumer of our interests are in the minority and lower income communities throughout Hartford and other municipalities throughout the state. You probably know that the city of Hartford is one of the 10 poorest cities in 2021. And when you look at an analogy that's happening right now on the international front, we're a situation of Ukraine being invaded by a bully, Vladimir Putin. And the president of the United States has simply said that the American people will bear the brunts at the gas pump. The brunt will also be bare in wheat and corn. So if that's being impacted there, and we already see gas, I just filled up my tank today and almost paid $4 a gallon, then imagine with this situation what's going to happen. Poor people are already going to bear the brunt of what's happening right now. So to make an assumption that this is not, there's no evidence is poppycock. I know we heard someone say that earlier. There's no correlation, and hopefully there's a fantasy that the $40 million could potentially go into the communities, or we say in our hood. It hasn't happened then, and this would not necessarily happen now unless you begin to change how you view this bill and make it inclusive in terms of the discussion. And when you do that, then it becomes something of a consideration in another arena. So it's very important when we deal with this issue to have that type of mindset and balance, because 2 cents, 3 cents, 4 cents adds up to a mother, a single mother who can't feed her child the way she should or could in the community. So that's all I will say on this matter. And so, no, I do not support SB 115.
Yvonne, thank you for your testimony and for your persistence. Don't go yet. We have a question from Representative Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, Yvonne, it's good to see you after all these years.
Hi.
Hi. So I just, the Voices of Women of Color have been really active tonight, and I'm just was trying to learn a little bit more about them. Are they a lobbying group?
No.
But they're a for-profit entity, yes?
Yeah, well, I am a supporter of the organization. I do not work for Voices of Women of Color. I support the issues concerning women of color. So I align myself. If you want to speak to the person to speak for Voices of Women of Color, that would be Denise Best, who is the founder, and she had been trying to get into the room. I don't know what happened. She got kicked out the room. I'm not sure what happened there, but that's the person you need to speak to. But I will say that we align with issues regarding children and families that impact our community. And this is one of them. When we came before you last year regarding the plastic bag situation, we didn't win that one, but we levied the same charges, the same issues, because what we're seeing in this community, what we're seeing right now, is there still a lack of real empathy and understanding to want to relate to what's happening in the community. I understand the issues related to the landfill, environmental racism, And when I first came to Connecticut, I've been involved in that in terms of the cancer that we saw over in the meadows. That's all true. But we can walk and chew gum as it relates to legislation. Even if there's an appearance that there may be some sort of difference in our community, it's necessary that our leaders and our legislators make the extra effort to try to really understand. And if I grew up poor. I grew up poor in Litchfield County. And so anything growing up within, if my mother didn't bring home the food, it didn't happen. We had to eat the same thing every day. So when we feed people, we fed 118,000 families, my organization alone, a group of us, since July of 2020, and Voices of Women of Color in the thousands that they fed. So when you go in a situation like this, something that would logically make sense, and of course we are concerned about the environment, we should be, but anything that's happening that passes on right now could have a devastating blow, particularly during COVID. And right now, what's happening with inflation and what's happening on the international scale, we're going to experience it more.
No, I understand absolutely you're concerned about the onerous burden, especially on people of color, people in distressed communities. Absolutely. I have been saying this all night, though. I do think that environmentalism is inherent in making sure that those communities are lifted up and have less of a burden placed on them, because they do tend to be the repositories of polluting entities. And so environmental justice dictates that we try to help the air quality, the water quality there. But anyway, I thank you for your testimony.
We should do that, but have our voices engaged in that process of how to do those things. And that's where the disconnect comes in when we're in these spaces. We need to, you're learning about voices of women of color, but I would challenge you, my dear sister, I would challenge you to get engaged, to know who we are, because we all come from different backgrounds. Some of the very women who have testified tonight are daughters or granddaughters of women that were on welfare, who had to raise their children by themselves. They're coming from a space of lack, but they have made something of themselves and feel an obligation to come back to this community. I think that legislation has to be like that. The voices pay taxes and are socially conscious. And so this is really, really important. When you start to do that, then you're going to start to see how the community will want to have a dialogue. So it's not just us against them or us against you. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I absolutely do.
It needs to be done.
Yep. And I think we need to work together. That's what I'm trying to say. So, yeah. Thanks, Yvonne.
Thank you. God bless everyone.
Again, thank you for your testimony and have a good evening. Next, we're going to go to Olivia Rinkus, followed by Annie Lane.
Good evening. My name is Olivia Rinkus. I'm from North Stonington, Connecticut. Thank you to the Environment Committee for the opportunity to testify. I'm here tonight to oppose SB 115. SB 115 on the grounds that this is going to just, affect consumers at a cost. It's just another way to pass the cost on to consumers, and it really doesn't go at the root of the problem. And so I am opposing this bill, and thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Well, Olivia, thank you for your patience and for sticking it out with the rest of us here on the committee. We appreciate your time and testimony. I don't see any hands raised in the room, so we are going to move on next to Annie Lane, followed by Chris Phelps.
Hi, good evening. I'm Annie Lane.
I'm the Director of Product Sustainability for Worthington Industries. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to present testimony regarding House Bill 5142. So I'm here presenting on behalf of Worthington Industries, a leading US-based cylinder manufacturer. Over the last year, we've worked closely with Connecticut legislators, municipal governments, retailers, recyclers, waste management sites, propane distributors, parks, and campgrounds to address the concerns set out by this committee in the last legislative session, namely being to develop a plan that would allow for free, convenient, and accessible statewide collection of pressurized cylinders. A copy of that plan is included in our written submission. This plan is open for other producers of cylinders to join, or they may choose to develop their own plan. I want to say thank you to the many stakeholders in Connecticut that helped us during this process, including Senator Cohen, Representative Gresco, Senator Minor, Representative Harding, the staff at DEEP, and Jennifer Heaton-Jones. This collaboration has led to legislation we believe achieves a balanced solution that accounts for the concerns brought forward by Connecticut stakeholders. As a result, we are pleased to support the bill introduced today. As the bill is in keeping with lessons learned related to producer responsibility in jurisdictions like Canada, it also ensures a level playing field by capturing all companies that supply pressurized cylinders to the state of Connecticut. It focuses on outcomes rather than process, thereby providing companies opportunities to innovate in how they organize themselves and how they choose to meet performance goals. And finally, it provides adequate time for producers of pressurized cylinders to establish the necessary commercial agreements, the transportation and processing infrastructure, and to implement the necessary communication to residents. Rush timelines can lead to cost premiums and increase the risk that the new system will not be well received by consumers. I would like to conclude by mentioning Bill 115, an act concerning extended producer responsibility for consumer packaging. We fully support the exclusion of items like pressurized cylinders when they are covered in other stewardship programs. From a principled perspective, we believe that products that may be hazardous or require special handling like gas cylinders should be regulated under separate legislation. Broad-based consumer packaging legislation does not account for the complexities of collecting and managing these materials, which often require different systems. Thank you for your consideration. I'm available to take any questions.
Annie, thank you. It's good seeing you again. Thank you for your persistence today and for your testimony and for Worthington keeping their word last year and working in the off session with members of this committee, myself, Senator Cohen, Senator Minor, going forward. It was refreshing to see the industry step up and acknowledge that they were the boots on the ground, so they were the best to come up with a solution to which we had instructed. I just wanted to, for clarity's sake, there was a question earlier today about a fee coming up as a result of this, and I just wanted to say, based on the language that you have provided, this is going to be internalized, so there would not be any fee, correct?
That's correct.
Oh, there you go. Short and sweet. I don't see any other hands raised in the room. Annie, thank you very much. And again, it was a pleasure working with you, and hopefully we can get this bill over the finish line.
Thank you. Agreed.
Have a good night.
You too.
Next is we have Lori Vitigliano, followed by Chris Phelps.
Good evening, Senator Cohen, Representative
well, actually Chairman Gresco, Senator Minor, Representative Harding, and members of the Environment Committee. I'm Lori Vitagliano from the South Central Connecticut Regional Water Authority. The RWA appreciates the opportunity to provide comments in support of House Bill 5142, an act concerning EPR for certain gas cylinders. By way of background, the RWA provides approximately 42.5 million gallons of water per day to some 430,000 consumers in 15 communities in our region. And the source of this water is a system of aquifer and watershed areas. But also Hazway Central is one of our programs. The RWA operates Hazway Central. It's Connecticut's first permanent household hazwaste collection center, serving 17 municipalities. We've been there for over 30 years, servicing that program from May until October every year. And producer responsibility, EPR for gas cylinders would really be a success for this program. Residents are always trying to deliver this waste during the off season. We have successful stewardship programs for electronics and mattresses and paint. So we support moving forward with EPR for gas cylinders. Also, we support the extended producer responsibility for tires as well. You've had a very long day, and I have nothing new to say, just underscoring moving forward with these two bills. Thank you.
Lori, thank you for sticking it out with us and for your testimony. I don't see any hands raised in the room. So again, have a good evening. And we are going to move on to Chris Phelps, followed by Amy Patterson.
Thank you, Chairman. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Representative Gresco, and all the members of the committee who have stuck it out for the last 12.5 hours of this hearing. I've been listening to the testimony, and it's been very interesting for me, especially on the bills we're testifying on. We have submitted comments on a number of your bills. I'm going to speak to 2 of them here. Briefly, I want to speak to our support for Senate Bill 118 regarding polystyrene packaging products ban. We've spoken on that before in prior years, and all I'll say is it's a very good bill, and for Pete's sake, I hope this year it actually passes. I'd like to take the rest of my time to speak to Senate Bill 115, the extended producer responsibility for consumer packaging bill that you've heard so much about. We've submitted testimony saying that we do support the do support the idea of EPR for consumer packaging strongly, actually. We think it needs to happen in Connecticut, but we cannot at this time support the bill before you, in particular because of the language in the bill that would tend to include plastic to fuel incineration and burning, so-called chemical recycling and advanced recycling in the EPR program as a form of recycling. To be crystal clear, it is not recycling. It is a greenwashing technology slickly branded by industry to take something that's not environmentally preferable, environmentally conscious or sound, and try to brand it as such by slapping the word recycling on it. What they do is they take plastics, return them to their basic petrochemical base, and then burn it like any other fossil fuel. Hypothetically, that fuel or that gas can be repolymerized into plastic products, new plastic products. But in practice, at facility after facility after facility where it's tried to do it, it's proven to be technologically challenging and economically inviable. This is really a bright line for the environmental community, this issue in particular. We've heard other comments raised about this bill today from other voices that frankly have given me some more pause about the bill. And I think there's still more work that needs to be done on other provisions here. That is the biggest issue we have with this bill, is this issue of so-called chemical recycling and advanced recycling, which is really just another branded name for plastic to fuel. I'll just, in the few seconds I have left, note that with all due respect to Commissioner Dykes, I was actually disappointed when I saw her testimony this morning. And she indicated that this bill reflects the input of numerous stakeholders, including the industry associations, who testified to that fact today that they were in the room for the last year helping write this bill. And she said it included their input as well as the input of environmental organizations. I've been doing this for 20 years in Connecticut. I've been working with all the groups in the environmental community who have an interest in this bill, who you've heard from today saying they have challenges and problems with this bill. I'm not aware of a single environmental organization who was presented information about this bill prior to a week or so ago, and not a single environmental organization whose input is reflected in the bill before you. I'm disappointed in my friend Commissioner Dykes for putting her name on testimony saying otherwise. In short, we want to see EPR for packaging happen in Connecticut. This bill doesn't do it. It could, but it needs work, and it needs the input of stakeholders, not just the environmental community, as you've heard loud and clear today. I'm sure I'm over my 3 minutes. I'm amazed Gaia hasn't cut me off, so I will do it and stop there, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Well, Chris, thanks for self-regulating and for sticking around with us for this lengthy public hearing. However, I don't see any hand up in the room, so we are going to wrap things up. And oh, Amy. Oh wait, we do have a question. Representative Hennessy. I was getting ahead of myself. Don't go anywhere, Chris.
Okay. Well, it's not really a question. It's I haven't spoken today, so I just wanted to, indicate that I am alive and that I do have a voice, and to say hello, Chris, and thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Well, thank you, Representative. And I can see all the faces of the senators and representatives who've been listening to this testimony from so many voices for the last, like I said, 12 and a half hours. And I want to thank you for your fortitude. These Zoom hearings are rough, but I have noticed that there are more faces on the screen than I see in the hearing rooms when we're at the LOB. But this is an important issue, Representative, and I thank you for listening to it. I thank all of you for listening to this. We do think this bill needs work. We do need to address the very real challenges of our plastics and our waste system in Connecticut. For Selectman Knickerbocker's comments earlier about the opportunities for this are really real, but this bill needs work, and it needs the input of more stakeholders than just the self-interested industries who are in the room helping write this bill. It needs a broader airing that'll be to produce a product that'll be much more in the public interest. And with that, I really will step down off my soapbox and let folks get on with their evening.
Well, I just want to say that I always appreciate your testimony and your passion and your insight when you come before the Environment Committee to testify.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hennessy, and Chris, again, thanks for the testimony. And we are going to move on to our last speaker, Amy Patterson. Last but not least, Amy, thank you for sticking out the marathon. And nothing like running in the woods, but it's a show of your perseverance. Please go right ahead.
I can't believe I'm the last person. I thought I was the second to last. So this is quite an honor. So good evening, and thank you, Representative Gresco and distinguished members of the Environment Committee. For the record, I'm Amy Blaymore Patterson, and I'm the Executive Director of the Connecticut Land Conservation Council. I really am stunned that I'm the last speaker tonight. Thank you for this opportunity to present testimony and wrap this up tonight. And I'm going to be testifying as to SB 117 and 119. And as you know, I did submit written testimony, and so I will be brief. We know the myriad benefits that forests and trees and other natural resources provide to mitigate the impacts of climate change, to our physical and mental health, health of our environment, and to our state and local economies, among others. It's essential that these benefits be considered at every level of planning and management of our state's public lands. So I want to thank the committee in raising SB 117. Hats off to Senator Minor and Representative Horn and their responsiveness to the situation that arose at Housatonic Meadows. CLCC has also heard from many concerned citizens about the tree removal project at the park. We attended Deep's presentation and the CEQ meetings on the issue to learn as much about it as possible. And I learned quite a bit today in listening throughout the entire day at this public hearing. We have also, though, been contacted by people and groups about other tree removal projects elsewhere around the state in parks and forests and other public lands. And I will say that this is truly a public trust issue. in every sense of the words. In addition to the loss of the trees, concern and outrage stems from a lack of notice and information in advance of the cutting. There are concerns about objectivity and expertise with respect to the hazard designation and questions about remediation after the cutting has been done. So SB 117 is a really good step forward in terms of process. The bill and also the testimony we heard today from the commissioner, other stakeholders and CEQ, as well as your questions, they signal a much needed readiness to address not only the issues that the bill seeks to remedy, but also broader issues when it comes to protection of our trees and forests. What we heard today also underscores the need for investments to ensure that DEEP has the capacity to implement these and other new requirements, not to mention current responsibilities. And finally, they reflect the timeliness of adopting a more comprehensive program of compensatory reforestation and mitigation through utility and state agency actions. And we welcome the opportunity to work with you and participate in that process. CLCC also supports SB 119, providing municipalities with another investment option to maximize the value of the monies it has transferred into the climate resilience projects, or into the Climate Resilience Fund, I'm sorry. We supported this concept in the past, and it's taken on an even greater importance in light of new and increased federal funds for climate resilience projects. And as alluded to by Jim Finch of Branford, the same can be said for the need for municipalities to have the tools to raise the revenue for that fund to match state and federal dollars. That's it. So thank you for this opportunity to provide our comments and for all you do. I have to say there are just so many bills on today's agenda that are worthy of support, and I will be reviewing many of them that I had not had an opportunity to thoughtfully consider before submitting testimony, and I will be doing that. So I want to thank you for all of that, and thank you for this opportunity to close it out tonight, if that's true. And of course, happy to answer any questions you might have.
Amy, thank you again for your testimony and for your perseverance. I don't see, yes, I do. Representative O'Day has a question.
No, thank you very much, Amy, for your testimony. Actually, I'm just reminding everybody, I didn't forget, I still owe a pizza party from the bottle bill last year. I don't think I owe one for tonight. I don't think I was the one that asked the most questions. So, Amy, I will leave you alone with no more further questions. And I just wanted to let the committee know I didn't forget that I owe everybody a pizza party. And thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for your time and indulgence to the committee. And Amy, thank you for sticking around.
Thank you.
Extra cheese and pepperoni would be good, you know. Hopefully, you know, when we get back into the building, but I don't want to jump ahead of the curve here. Senator Minor.
Thank you. I was Amy, good to see you. I was just going to suggest that if you don't mind, Amy, I'd have requesting that you and Gaia review the tape and give us an official ruling on whether O'Day owes us for another pizza or what the deal is, because I think it's close. Good to see you, and thanks for staying with us. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Senator Minor. I appreciate it. It's good to see you too.
Representative Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to remind my good colleague, Representative O'Day, to include some vegan pies. Thank you.
Well, if I had known it was this much fun to stay for the end of the meeting, I would have signed up to be the last speaker. So thank you all so much. Have a great night.
No, you wouldn't. No, thank you, Amy. And as we wrap, you know, I was, thank you for your testimony. And just quickly, you know, I'm having an issue in my town about the removal of 8 trees for a pickleball court. And I put some testimony in the other night, and it dawned on me that I wouldn't know what to say if it was countered. Well, DEEP took down 500 trees. Why can't we take down 8 trees? Luckily, that wasn't the angle, but it's a great point that you made, and many others earlier in the day had made. So thank you, everybody, for the marathon. It wasn't what was the record last year? It was 15 hours last year. We're just gonna get away with less than 11. But thanks for your perseverance. And again, the Environment Committee is a pleasure to serve on with all of you. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.